pods have kept us going this past year. We aren't the only ones who thrive together and rely on our pods. The Salish Sea is home to the southern resident orcas, who eat together, play together, and enjoy each other's company. Our southern resident orcas need our help. With dwindling salmon runs, pollution, and ship noise in their home waters, it's time for us to take action. So this Orca Month, join us for online events. Let's celebrate with our pods while protecting theirs. Join our events throughout the month of June. Visit www.orcamonth.com to find out more about Orca Month.
Should we start? Hello, welcome everybody. Happy Sunday. This is the 15th annual Orca Month being put on by the Orca Salmon Alliance. My name is Alan Budwill, but it's pronounced Budwale. And yeah, with me is Cindy Hansen from Orca Network. Are we ready to roll here?
I think we're ready.
Thank you everybody for joining us. I think we've all done one too many Zooms during this pandemic. So first, we're both vaccinated, and I'm not sure why you had me get a rabies shot, but I'm fine with that. We're here to not only celebrate orcas, but take action. You know, it's very important this day, and all these organizations have come together. We're at the Orca Survey Center in Friday Harbor, run by the Center for Whale Research, but so many organizations have made this possible. So should we talk a little bit about what the rundown is today?
We have an amazing lineup today. We're going to have a section with elected officials. We have a tribal welcome from the Samish. We have some videos for kids. We have some videos for adults. We have videos for all ages. And we're going to do a research section and a section on orcas around the world. So it's going to be just an amazing lineup.
And when we started, I thought, okay, we need another Zoom meeting, but really this is such an opportunity to bring in all these people from everywhere to not only watch, but participate. So we've got a great day planned, and I hope leave us on all day, check back with us. I think it would be great, some amazing videos. And one thing we forgot are the games. We have games. And I'd like to turn it over to Colleen Weiler of Whale and Dolphin Conservation to talk about a fun way to engage today. Hello, Colleen.
Hi there. So first, we are getting some questions in the chat of people who are seeing a black screen and not seeing video. I was just typing a response. Okay, they can see now. So I just suggest checking your view settings if you are seeing a black screen and switching over to a gallery view right now so you can hopefully see the person who's speaking and not just a black screen. And then, yes, as Alan mentioned, we're all kind of getting a little bit of probably virtual event Zoom fatigue these days after a year of virtual events. So we wanted to make things a little bit more entertaining and fun today and play some Orca Action Month kickoff bingo to get everyone's brains and ears and eyes engaged. So a little bit of ground rules. This is opportunistic bingo. We're not going to be calling out any specific cards or, the name and letter combinations that you would in normal bingo. So you're just going to be listening for phrases, for words, or for things that are typical both to Southern Resident Orca presentations. So like a photo of Granny, someone says something about Chinook, Snake River, stuff like that, as well as things that we're all too familiar with right now from virtual events for the past year. So somebody's video not working. I think we got one of those already. Someone being on mute, technical issues. So if any of this happen, you're going to mark them off in your bingo card. I am going to put a link in the chat shortly as soon as I stop sharing my screen here, so you can start your own virtual bingo card. This is virtual, so it'll just pop up a new window on your tablet or phone or whatever you're watching on today, and you can mark it off as we go through the event today. And again, I will share that link out in the chat shortly, and then it should also be in your registration email if you registered for the event in advance. And then if you get a bingo, you are going to send us your name and email and a screenshot or a download of your card. You can do either one and submit that through Google Forms. Again, I will pop a link in the chat in just a second so you can send us your completed bingo card and make sure that you get your awesome prizes that we're going to have. And any questions, I'll be monitoring the chat. I'll be happy to answer them, or you can send me an email directly and I'll put my email in the chat as well. And then everyone who plays along is going to get a special digital download. And we're going to randomly select the top 3 winners, or randomly select 3 winners to get some really cool prizes. We have some stickers, we have some t-shirts, we have some Orca trading cards, and some other cool swag for you. So again, keep an eye in the chat. I'm going to pop the links in there and play along some cool Orca Month bingo with us today. And I'll throw it back to Alan and Cindy.
Thanks very much, Colleen, for all your hard work. And my understanding, organized crime is not involved in any way in this bingo game. Is that correct? Okay. We have so many experts here today, and I'm not one. I am, I guess I'm a marine biologist in the sense that George Costanza on Seinfeld is a marine biologist. So I'd like to get a few words and comments. First, Cindy, would you like to, you're on deck. Would you like to go?
I would be happy to. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. There are so many people to thank. I don't have time to thank all of them, but first of all, the Center for Whale Research has really helped us a lot with this. Katie Jones has opened up the Orca Survey Education Center for us to be here today. And Lodi, Budwill has been doing so much work behind the scenes. Alan, thank you so much for being here today to help us out and moderate and MC today. You'll be hearing in just a moment from Amanda Colbert, who along with Susan Anderson have been behind the scenes doing all of the coordination for this event and Orca Month in general. So they've been doing an amazing job. Colleen Weiler, who you just heard from, huge help with all of this, and all of our partners at the Orca Salmon Alliance. And I also just want to give a shout out to all of the people who submitted videos for today. When we first put the call out for this, we were just amazed at how many people were willing to actually take the time and create videos for this. And they're just really incredible videos, beautifully done. So I'm just humbled and really touched at how willing people were to contribute to this. So it really just kind of speaks to how people feel about these orcas and how they really kind of help bring people together from literally all over the world in this case. And thanks all of you for joining us today. Thank you for caring about the orcas and wanting to learn about them and wanting to take action to help them. So I'll turn it over to Amanda to say a few words. Oh, you're on mute, Amanda.
I gotcha. I was just giving everybody a chance to mark something off their bingo cards. So I do want to say I definitely echo Cindy's sentiments. There were a lot of people on board and on deck that helped pull all of this together, as well as events that are going to happen throughout the rest of the month. So I want to extend my sincere thanks as well. It's really been an honor and a privilege to be involved in coordinating Orca Action Month efforts this year. I can't tell you how cool it is to have so many people coming together for the Southern Resident Orcas. You know, we are family in this way, unified in this joint effort to celebrate, help recover the orcas, take action. And my hope is that you guys all have fun. Maybe you learn something new if you consider yourself an orca expert, and that something sparks an interest and an inspiration in order to get everybody to act. So thanks for having us today. I'm just as excited to see everything we have planned as you all are, and I'll turn it back over to Alan and Cindy.
Thank you, and thanks for all your hard work. Are you hearing Cindy okay?
She's a little less clear than you are, Alan, but
it's my loud, bloviating broadcast voice is the problem. I can sit back here. Yeah, I don't want to blow people's speakers out. I'd like to bring in Susan Berta to introduce our next guest. What's so important, and you both mentioned that there are so many people from all levels and walks, and one of the important partners, of course, are the indigenous peoples and tribes. So Susan Berta from Orca Network, take it away.
Thank you, and thanks for joining us, everyone, today. It's great to see so many of you out there in Orca land. But as we always start our events, we wanted to take a few minutes to acknowledge both the ancestral and present day indigenous peoples and the tribal lands and waters and the boundaries that have made up the Salish Sea since time immemorial. We recognize and are grateful for the ancestral and continued stewardship of these lands and waters. Please welcome the next presenters will be Rosie Caillou James and Bill Bailey from the Samish Nation as they perform a blessing for this year's Orca Action Month. We're so thankful Rosie and Bill have been able to do blessings for many of our events. They're just such wonderful longtime friends to us and to many individuals and organizations who are involved in advocacy and stewardship work, and as well as the whales that they consider family. Rosie is currently the Indigenous Plants Forum Coordinator for the Weiss Center for Historical Ecology of the Salish Sea, and Bill is a master carver with the Samish Nation. We're so honored to have them be part of our Orca Month event.
Okay, I've been honored once again this year to be an opener for the Orca networks and for the orcas. You know that what we have out here is the kingdom of orcas, the kingdom of our ancestors. I want to sing a song for our ancestors here on this beautiful island of Lopez, which a lot of orcas call home as well. We wonder, where do they call home? They're like us. They have gathering villages. They have family to visit. So I'm going to sing a song to invite their spirits all over here. Invite their spirits into the bay here. Ask them to come and be one together with us on the sacred day that we honor them. The Lummies, Tlalops, Swinomish, Kikialis, and the Mitchell Bay, Upper Skagit, they're all connected to orcas. All the Coast Salish are connected. Over on the coast, the peninsula, all connected to orcas. All the wildlife are connected to the orcas. Okay, I will sing this here song.
Ya hey ya.
hey, ho. Ya, hey, ya, hey, ya, hey, ya, hey. Oh, ya, hey, ya, ya, hey, ya, ya, hey, ya, ya, hey, ya, hey, ya, hey, ya, hey, That's some of what we hold on to. We hold on to that in our life about how to take care of one another. How do the orcas take care of us? We don't know, but we know that they take care of us more. Let me put it this way, they take care of us more than we know. They gather us. They help heal us. They send us spiritual energy from the sacred water. There's so much more you can add to what it means to be an instrument for their knowledge. I am very happy to do this on Lopez Island. I want to thank Madrona for inviting me here today. Thank Cindy for being here, and thank Ken for being here. Aiska.
Yeah.
That was so beautiful. And I want to thank Samish elders, Rosie, Caillou, James, and Bill Bailey for sharing that blessing. And I think it's so true that the orcas are bringing us all together today, albeit via Zoom. One of our other special guests is Rena Priest. She's an enrolled member of the Lummi Nation and was appointed to serve as Washington State Poets Laureate for the term April 2021 through 23. And she has now words to share about the Southern residents, the depth of their plight, and but why to not give up hope for these orchids? Rena Priest.
Nautsia ministracha, ohelixen quinus natacha litiakaya, sahueltanat sinasnat chaklumisin. Hello everyone, thank you for inviting me here today to share a few poems with you. I'd like to begin by thanking the Washington State Arts Commission and Humanities Washington for their support of the Washington State Poet Laureate program. This next poem I wrote, it was featured, well, it wasn't featured, but it was included in an anthology. Let's see. This anthology, For Love of Orcas, which was edited by Andrew Shattuck McBride and Jill McCabe Johnson. And then what's really exciting is that the proceeds from sales of this anthology benefits the CDOC Society in support of their efforts to restore the southern resident orca population. So I think that's super cool. And also it was awarded with the 2020 Nautilus Award, and the Nautilus Award is given for books that have a social or environmental justice focus. And this poem was included in there, and it's called Words of Encouragement. with an epigraph by W.S. Merwin from his poem On a Coming Extinction. One must always pretend something among the dying. W.S. Merwin. When writing poems about extinction, it's important that you make the poems deep but uplifting. Nobody wants to read a bummer poem about endangered orcas and their dead babies. Keep it light, keep it motivational, encouraging. It's important to accommodate your gentle reader. Don't say anything about how, if you won't swim in it, why should they have to live in it? Don't say that. Honesty is offensive in this day and age. It's always been offensive. How else do you suppose we got here? Maybe instead of saying something like, the orcas and salmon are going extinct because of ordinary greed and apathy, instead say something like, the noble creature with his power and grace shall journey away forever through the portals of time. Good taste omits mention of baby orcas abducted to be theme park clowns, decades in chlorinated cages taking their eyes, how during the capture so many died. Don't forget to forget what you know about human cruelty, how the baby orcas that didn't survive had their bellies slit and filled with stones and then were sewn closed and dumped into the sea to sink into a darkness, into a silence so dark and so deep public outrage couldn't reach, a depth unfathomable as a mother's grief, too heavy to carry for one day, much less 17. Among the dying shall we pretend that in the end we too shall not be listed among the dead? Yes, let's pretend when writing poems about extinction. So that's a hard one, and in order to not make this too dark and also to remember what we're here for, to celebrate Orca Month, I'll close with this poem that I feel is very hopeful. It's called Remembering Sila at Schwalisen. Now, Sila is our Clacktamish word for grandmother, and Schwalisen is a place name, and it talks about how at low tide there's a bridge that you can cross to an island on, and yeah, so I'll just go ahead and read it. It's Remembering Sila at Schwalisen. We used to say, when the tide is out, the table is set. The earth provided, and if one day it didn't, the spirit fed us. The glittering turn of the tide, the arc of the sun in the sky, the call of birds, the sound of waves. To be nourished in this way makes glass doors opening and closing themselves between me and that food on grocery store shelves seem false, empty. That food, where does it come from? Whose hands grew it? Was there patience and care? Were there prayers? Think of how it got there, what it's made of. When I was a girl, everything we ate came from the earth that loved us through hands of people we loved. Now, the reason that I feel that that's hopeful is because it wasn't that long ago. It was 2 generations ago, you know, when my grandmother was a girl, and this region, this bioregion still was healthy enough to sustain the people. And I think that nature is so resilient and so wise. I think that if we stop impacting it and are conscientious of how we're living and try to live in a way that is less impactful, that it will heal itself, that things can come back, that you know, the salmon can return and the orcas can return. I don't think it's too late yet. So that gives me hope. And I'd just like to say happy Orca Month, and I wish you all the best. Hai kucha.
Rena Priest, Washington State Poet Laureate. Thank you for those words. And as I'm listening to her, it's like we should not lose hope for these amazing orcas. And speaking of orcas, who brought that up? Hope, family, all of the unity is coming together today for our celebration of Orca Action Month. I think it used to be Orca Month, but we need to take action. The Southern residents, we wanted to share what it looks like when the Southern residents get together like a family, one giant group. And I think the scientists, which I am not, call it a super pod when everybody is there, all the whales are there. And I'm supposed to not mess up this next introduction because it's my wife. Lodi Gilbert Budwill is with the Center for Whale Research, and she narrated footage that she captured during a special super pod. Now, Lodi has been passionately observing the whales for over 30 years, and you can feel her connections as she describes this unique encounter with the director, Ken Balcom, on a boat. So let's watch and listen to Lodi react.
What you're seeing here is the greeting that we witnessed. It almost felt like a family reunion of sorts. Ken had positioned the Center for Whale Research boat Chimo a good distance away from any other boats that were on the water that day, and actually what felt to me like a good distance away from the whales. But he knew exactly what he was doing, of course, and he cut the engines and stood just very knowingly with his camera in hand, waiting for the whales to approach him. And sure enough, they did. They burst through the surface of the water with their exhalations, and they glided towards the starboard side of Chimo and just held there in logging position for quite some time. We even heard some beautiful above water vocalizations. And then it was time for Ken to get the ID photos for Orca Survey. This was actually the first super pod in a number of years where all members of JK and L pod were present in the inland waters. So this is a fantastic opportunity for him to get the ID shots on certain whales that hadn't been seen for some time. This day was extra special and significant because J35 Tahlequah was sighted with her newborn calf. Ken described the newborn as healthy and precocious, which was wonderful news to hear. And it kind of makes you wonder if this was a family gathering celebrating the newborn, a new baby in the family.
Woohoo! And again. Now Ken's gonna owe us IDs on those breachers.
Oh.
The three-tail logs.
After several incredible hours in the presence of the whales and hundreds, if not thousands, of photos that were taken during that time, Ken finally said, you know, we really need to leave these guys here and head for home. And it was getting late in the day and we were many miles from shore. So he turned Chimo and he started to head towards the harbor. Well, I kept my eyes peeled on the whales behind us because I was actually really sad to say goodbye and to leave them. So I was watching them and I noticed that they pivoted in position as we were departing the area. And then they started porpoising towards the back of the boat. And so I tugged on Ken's shirt sleeve because he had his eyes on the horizon. And I'm like, Ken, I think the whales are following us. And he just kind of laughed and he said, yeah, they do that sometimes. They make it hard to get home. And so I'm like, no, seriously, they are like following the boat. They're catching up with us. And they ended up on both sides of the boat, almost as if they were escorting us home. And what fascinated me was that every time Ken would speed up, the whales would speed up. And every time he would slow down, the whales would slow down. It's almost like they were trying to keep perfect pace with the boat all the way across the strait. After several miles of travel with the whales, Ken stopped the boat. And you can see here that we're much closer to shore at this point. We're off the west side of San Juan Island. And the whales moved in front of the boat. So they're just off the bow of Chimo. And what happened next was just amazing. They engaged in a full-on roly-poly cuddle puddle, just full of tactile behaviors. Whales cheek to cheek and spy hopping. And it almost seemed like a love fest. It was very special. I love that they followed us home. What a memorable day.
All right, guys. Well, I'm going to give you another opportunity at a bingo square. We actually had Alan and Cindy get bumped off of Zoom. So I'm going to take over momentarily. We're going to move you and transition you into the next portion of what we're going to share. And so what we wanted to do was provide you with a brief history of Orca Month. And so Susan Berta is still on here. I know Howard Garrett has joined us as well. And they were kind enough to kind of walk us through the process of how this celebration began, how it grew. And as Alan mentioned before, it used to just be Orca Awareness Month. And after we got enough people on board with the awareness campaign, we segued into asking for the actions that are going to be necessary to recover the Southern residents. So I'm going to get the video queued up with Susan and Howard, and we're going to get our co-hosts back on here in just a second. So hang tight with me.
Hi, I'd like to introduce Susan Berta
and Howard Garrett. We're the co-founders of Orca Network, and in 2007, we started Orca Month. We'd like to share a short slideshow of the history of the last 15 years of Orca Month. And now, live from Orca Network, welcome to the 15th annual Orca Month.
And as we begin screen sharing for the slideshow, I'd like to mention that in 2005, the Southern resident orca community was declared endangered under the Endangered Species Act. And so it seemed only right to draw attention to these amazing and mysterious orcas that we share these waters of Puget Sound with. When J2 Granny passed away, we dedicated that year's Orca Awareness Month to her as the Grand Dame, the matriarch of the Southern resident orcas. And we began efforts to encourage everyone to work toward creating a month-long effort to raise awareness and attention to the endangered Southern resident orcas. And we began in June, making June Orca Month, because in June, all the Southern residents usually were around in the Salish Sea around the San Juan Islands. But of course, in recent years, in the past about 8 years, they have not returned every year. And that is why we had to transition from Orca Awareness Month to Orca Action Month.
We started by making a petition to name June as Orca Month in 2007. We collected 500 signatures and applied to have our first proclamation for June as Orca Month in 2007. At that time, their population was 85 whales. In 2021, sadly, the population is only 75. That's after 15 years of Orca Month and Orca recovery efforts.
In 2007, the original proclamation was signed by Governor Gregoire, and it's pretty well stayed the same proclamation each year. And it does highlight that we have only begun to learn about this species' intelligence and social capabilities.
In our first year and many years since, we also partnered with the Washington Wine and Beverage Company, who had just launched their Orca wines. They wanted to not only market these wines, but to use them to educate people about the southern resident orcas. The great thing was they had displays in major grocery stores around Puget Sound, where they put up educational info about the southern resident orcas, and they also raised funds for orca recovery efforts through the sales of orca wine.
Our original logo featured J1 ruffles, the masthead, the great elder male of the southern resident orcas.
In 2009, we were honored to get to meet Governor Gregoire as she signed the proclamation, along with Karen Monroe-Ellick. Karen and Ralph Monroe have been great champions of the orcas from the 1970s and continue to this day helping the residents.
In 2009, also, Puget Sound Partnership joined in with us to bring awareness to the orcas with Orca Awareness Month, and they created this great logo that was used until 2015.
And in 2014, we were honored to be able to celebrate Orca Month on board the brand new Tokitai ferry. We had petitioned to have this ferry named after Lolita, who was captured in Penn Cove and has been at the Miami Aquarium ever since. It just so happened that the ferry came online on the Mukilteo Clinton Run in June of 2014, and we were able to celebrate that and Orca Month all together on board the new ferry.
And in 2016, the Orca Salmon Alliance of salmon and orca environmental organizations joined with Orca Network to sponsor Orca Month. And Sarah Haisong Shimazu designed this beautiful logo that very appropriately shows orcas in pursuit of salmon. Beginning in 2016, the state of Oregon and British Columbia, Canada joined with Washington in celebrating Orca Awareness Month.
Then in 2019, we changed the name to Orca Action Month, feeling that the good news is more and more people were aware of the orcas, but we felt not enough action was being taken. So we increased our advocacy and action efforts, and Sarah made this beautiful new logo for us.
And in 2019, Governor Inslee presented the proclamation and read the proclamation to this whole crowd of people, this bunch of very influential people on the steps of the Capitol, and presented it to Cindy Hansen, Orca Network's Education and Advocacy Coordinator. And at the same time, he signed 5 bills based on recommendations from his task force to protect and grow orca and salmon populations.
So we welcome you to the Orca Action Month 2021. Here's the newly signed proclamation. And we invite you to go to our orcamonth.com website and our Orca Month Facebook page to find all the amazing events that have been set up by the Orca Salmon Alliance and other organizations across the Salish Sea. Thanks for joining us. And we hope you take part in many of the actions and educational events this month and enjoy the month.
Hi, this is Representative.
Thank you very much, Howard and Susan. I'm Alan Budwill, along with Cindy Hansen from Orca Network. We're back. If you had a scorecard there for bingo about a technical issue, please mark that box off. It took us a little extra long because Cindy came back as a cat, but now we restored her, and we wanted to pick up where we left off. We were, of course, it's a cat. We were watching the video of the SuperPod filmed by Lodi Gilbert Budwill with the Center for Whale Research, and you had something you wanted to say about that.
Right. So I'm going to push Alan out of the way. I apologize if you couldn't hear me earlier, but we figured out where our microphone is on the computer. So hopefully you can all hear me now. So I just want to thank the Center for Whale Research for sharing that SuperPod video. It was so special. And thank you, Lodi, for narrating that. And I just wanted to share what that was like to experience that day on shore. There was a big group of us. Amanda and I were both there along with a lot of other people. We were on shore waiting for the whales to come for hours and hours, pretty much all day. But we were hearing from the people on the water, including Lodi, what was happening. We heard that there was a SuperPod, and then we heard that there was a new calf with Tahlequah, and that the calf was healthy and looked great. And just it's such an emotional day for all of us. We all wanted to hug each other, but of course we couldn't because we were in the middle of a pandemic. But just being able to be there together and experience that. And Lodi was texting us the whole time, telling us what the whales were doing and telling us not to leave and to wait because they were coming our way and would eventually be there. And they did actually show up just before sunset. So it was just wonderful to be able to experience that as our human pod, both on shore and on the water. And I think Lodi really captured that whole thing really beautifully, all the emotion of it. So thank you very much, Lodi, for sharing that with us. All right, now I'll let Alan come back.
I'm back. I think actually if I walked up to the courthouse, you could hear me from there. We're coming to you from downtown Friday Harbor today. It's Orca Action Month, and we've heard from a variety of people, and it's amazing. We've got a couple of representatives that want to participate, people that have actually made a difference. We've got keynotes from Washington Representative Deborah Plekanoff and U.S. Representative Jared Huffman out of California, both who have been advocates for the Southern residents. And so we salute them for their work with clean water, salmon, and their other environmental endeavors. Turn it over to them.
Hi, this is Representative Deborah Plekanoff of the 40th LD. I want to thank Washington State for rising up for those important values that make us Washington State. Today we're celebrating the mighty orca, the mighty salmon, all of the forage fish, all of the habitat, the cool and clean water, and the clean air that we need to make sure that our mighty resource of this state sustains his lifeway, just as the Coast Salish people have, and just as we will as Washingtonians. Let's rise up together and make this great state a better place for all who call this place home today and those who've called it home since time immemorial.
Hi, everyone. Congressman Jared Huffman here. Thanks so much for including me in helping kick off Orca Action Month. Orcas are a remarkable, treasured species. They have a unique tie to Californians like myself and to another species that is synonymous with my district, salmon. Today, I want to help highlight the southern resident orca, the Chinook salmon, and the role that Klamath dam removal plays in protecting these creatures. Unfortunately, the southern resident orca are in real trouble. There are only a meager 74 or so of them left in the wild, and we need to do all we can to protect them before they disappear altogether. Not only are southern resident orcas endangered, two species of Chinook salmon, their main prey item, are also endangered. So needless to say, this decreased quantity and quality of prey for the southern resident orca is an important issue if the species is going to survive. I won't get too into the weeds with you on this, but the southern resident orca migrations are tied to the movements of the various runs of Chinook and other salmon. Southern resident orcas range from central California to southeast Alaska. They eat Chinook salmon from many different runs and rivers within this area. And one of these areas is the Klamath River. The Klamath meets the ocean in my district in Northern California. which is the southern portion of the southern resident orca's range. So the Klamath was once the third largest salmon producing river in the United States. And at one point, it was home to one of the West Coast's most prolific salmon fisheries. Tribes have depended on the river's salmon since time immemorial, and these fish have continued to be a vital part of life for the communities in my district and beyond. But for more than a century, dams on the Klamath River have contributed to devastating declines in water quality. They've affected the region's salmon fisheries in adverse ways, and the tribes who depend on these fish have been severely impacted. Recreational and commercial fishing and other downstream users and communities have also suffered. So these dams fuel massive algal blooms every summer. They disrupt sacred ceremonies. It sickens the fish at the very heart of tribal cultures. And these fish, of course, are so important to our ocean and coastal biodiversity and our ecosystems as well, and to the at-risk southern resident orca. We're reaching a turning point, though, for salmon in the Klamath River. This river and the people who depend on it are running out of time. Since planning for dam removal started over 10 years ago, we have witnessed some of the worst salmon returns ever. Fish disease regularly claims more than 90% of juvenile salmon, including threatened coho salmon and the struggling spring run Chinook, which in turn has serious implications for whales that depend on them for food. When we take the dams out and invest in habitat restoration, we can bring back the salmon. And when we do that, we can help bring back southern resident orcas. It will be the largest dam removal project in the history of the United States, opening up 400 river miles of habitat for the first time in many decades. The benefits of a healthy Klamath River extend all the way to the ocean and to the salmon-dependent southern resident orcas who live there. Dam removal is projected to increase Chinook salmon in the Klamath River Basin up to 80%, providing a lot more food for southern resident orcas in their ocean home. But dam removal won't solve all of our salmon problems. Climate change also has significant impacts on salmon, on critical salmon habitat as well. We're seeing this in real time right now in my district and throughout California, where drought is poised to make it a very difficult year, another very difficult year for communities and wildlife. We need to think about the role of a changing climate for our oceans, our rivers, and our wildlife. And I've been working to tackle the climate crisis ever since I came to Congress. I guarantee that I will continue to fight for healthy oceans and for rivers and for people and for biodiversity. So thank you for being partners in these efforts. A special thanks to the Orca Network, the Orca Salmon Alliance, and to the tribal leaders and other partners who have been working tirelessly to save salmon on the Klamath River and beyond. Thank you.
I want to thank Representatives Lekanoff and Huffman for their continued stewardship and efforts for the southern resident orcas. Time for a little music. We're going to be here all day. I just feel like it's my old radio days, except you have to see our faces. We've got more on the science end, some fantastic videos still to come, but right now a little music. We've got a great band lined up. Pilots in Training. Their debut album was Lost in Our Skies, and they have an upcoming album called Utility Fog, but here's a live acoustic version of Pilots in Training. The song is called Glass Bottom Boat.
Hey, we're Pilots in Training. My name is Mark.
I'm Blake.
I'm Darvis. And this is Glass Bottom Boat. smiles on and do our best. Then we had our ups and downs. You stayed, my friend. You were always there like you always cared. Sail away on a glass bottom boat that takes you anywhere. Drift away, close my eyes to see you're no longer anywhere. Sail away on a glass bottom boat that takes you anywhere. Drift away, close my eyes to see someday I'll be ever there. When I'm in a dark, mean place, all hope is lost. Then you come and pull me out of my own dive. Then I started feeling ill. You made me smile. The only thing I need to say is what a friend. Sail away on a glass bottom boat that takes you anywhere. Drift away, close my eyes to see you're no longer anywhere. Sail away on a glass bottom boat that takes you anywhere. Drift away, close my eyes to see someday I'll be ever there.
So who are the southern resident orcas? There are 3 pods or family groups of southern residents.
I want to give a big thanks to pilots and training for that performance. I don't know if you could notice, Cindy, that the tide was coming in, but they got it in just before as their shoes were getting wet. As I said earlier, welcome to Orca Action Month. We've got a bunch of great videos, and this is almost like a little best of series. We pulled together a segment of videos for you. When I say we, I mean Cindy Hansen has, to show you some of the basics about these southern resident orcas and why they are so special. So you're going to see 3 videos. The first one is Katie Jones, who's helping us here in the background today. She's with the Center for Whale Research. There's a Seattle Aquarium video, and then Dr. Deborah Giles, I love this. She's out with her canine companion, Eba, sweet puppy, who has the unique skill of being able to sniff out whale poop. So let's watch.
So who are the southern resident orcas? There are 3 pods or family groups of southern residents, and they're known as J-pod, K-pod, and L-pod. Altogether, there are currently 75 orcas in the population, and they're genetically distinct from other orca populations. Here in the Salish Sea, we can actually see 2 different types of orcas. One type is known as Biggs orcas, or you might also hear them called transient orcas. Biggs orcas tend to travel in small groups, and they hunt and eat marine mammals like seals, porpoises, or even other whales. But for the purpose of this talk, I'm going to focus on the other type of orca we see here, the residents. So what are some characteristics of resident orcas? Well, unlike the Biggs orcas, residents eat fish, and they really focus on salmon in particular. They travel in large family groups,
and they tend to stay with their mothers and with their families for their entire lives. They can be very vocal and active on the surface, especially when they're socializing, and they do have some different physical characteristics. Sometimes some individual resident orcas will have what we call an open saddle patch. You can see an example of that in the photo in the upper left. See the black that's in the middle of the saddle patch? Biggs orcas don't have open saddles like that. Not all resident orcas will have an open saddle, but some of them certainly do. Residents may also have a more rounded dorsal fin compared to the Biggs orcas. One of the things that I find most endearing about the resident orcas is the fact that they stay with their mothers and with their families for life. It's a very tight-knit social community. Orcas are also matriarchal societies, and mom is in charge. This is just an example of one family tree in J-Pod. This is a family known as the J16s. They're called that since J16 is the mother of this family. I know we've already seen J16 in an earlier slide, and you can see her in the photo there at the top. J16 was estimated to have been born in 1972, and she's currently the oldest adult female in J-Pod. She has 3 living offspring that she's often seen in close proximity to. J26, who was born in 1991 and is a full-grown adult male. J36, who is an adult female, she was born in 1999. And J42, who's a young female born in 2007. This is just one example of a matriline in one of the pods. Some matrilines have multiple generations within them. Everyone loves babies, so let's talk a little bit about baby orcas. If you didn't know this already, baby orcas are called calves. Calves are born after a 17 to 18 month gestation period. Humans have a 9-month gestation period, so 18 months is a very long time. Baby orcas are about 6 feet long and around 400 pounds at birth. That might be similar to the size of your couch in your living room. They may look small when they're swimming next to mom, but they're big babies. And I have some good news to share. We've had 3 new births in the Southern resident community since early September of 2020. We're always so excited when new babies are born, and I do want to introduce these babies to you. J57 was born in early September 2020. His mother is J35, and he's a boy. J58 was born in late September 2020. Her mother is J41, and she's a girl. And L125 was born in early 2021. Its mother is L86, and we actually don't know if L125 is a boy or a girl. We have to get a photo of the baby's belly to tell for sure, and we haven't been able to do that yet. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Seattle Aquarium and to our Window on Washington Waters exhibit where we are celebrating Orca Action Month. My name is Katie, and joining me from underwater today is diver Alyssa. Hello, Alyssa.
Hello, hi everyone. Happy Orca Action Month.
Alyssa, can you tell us a little bit about this exhibit that you're diving in? What is it showing us?
Well, this exhibit is modeled after a popular dive site on the outer coast of Washington, near a place called Neah Bay. It's right on the tip of the Olympic Peninsula, where the Salish Sea and the Pacific Ocean meet together to form a hugely diverse ecosystem with cold, nutrient-rich water, huge volcanic rocky pinnacles, and lush kelp forests.
So this rocky reef and kelp forest habitat is an amazing home for so many of our underwater neighbors. And Alyssa, you mentioned cold water as part of this habitat. Can you give us an underwater weather report? What is it like in there today?
According to my dive computer, it is 55 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty balmy by Washington standards. It's pretty much as warm as it gets. But that is perfect for all of these local animals.
Now, 55 degrees Fahrenheit might sound a little chilly to us warm-blooded humans, but as Alyssa says, It is perfect for our underwater neighbors. All of these animals are really well adapted to life in this cold water environment. And that is especially true of one of our most famous, most iconic underwater neighbors. Alyssa, can you tell us a little bit about some of the salmon that are in this exhibit with you?
I am surrounded by coho salmon and a few sockeye salmon as well. Salmon spend the beginning of their lives in rivers and streams, travel into the ocean for their adult years, and back again to the very same river that they were born in to have their own babies. Because they use such a wide range of habitats, we need to make sure that all of our waters are cold, clean, and clear to keep them nice and healthy.
Those salmon do rely on that cold, clean water at every stage of their life cycle and throughout all of those habitats that they might pass through. So, Alyssa, what are some of the things that we can do up here on land that help to make sure those salmon have that cold, clean water that they need?
Well, no matter where we live, we all share a watershed, and that connects to all of our local waterways, all the way out to the Pacific Ocean. Our daily choices have a huge impact. So doing things like reducing our single-use plastics, making sure that our cars aren't leaking any gas or oil, and of course, talking to other folks about these important issues, voting, and telling our representatives that these environmental things matter to us. That's all going to help out these local critters.
Absolutely. We can all take a part, whether it's through our daily actions and routines or through sharing our thoughts and our feelings about what these salmon and other local residents need in order to have a clean, healthy home with our elected officials. Those are great ways to help take care of our underwater neighbors. And Alyssa, our salmon are one of our most iconic local fish. And they are also connected to another very famous underwater neighbor of ours here in the Pacific Northwest, who is one of the most famous marine mammals around here.
The orca whales, specifically the southern resident orca whales that only eat salmon. Their favorite are Chinook, or king salmon. But if we keep all of the salmon populations healthy, then we're also bolstering our orca populations. So many animals rely on the health of the salmon. We're all truly interconnected.
We most certainly are. Those orcas need to eat hundreds of pounds of salmon every day per orca in order to stay healthy. So having healthy and abundant populations of salmon is a great way to support a healthy, abundant population of orcas. So all the actions we talked about that are beneficial to salmon can help our orcas as well. And those orcas also help each other. They live in family groups and they pass on information and knowledge from one generation to the next. Alyssa, can you tell us a little bit about how those orcas share that information with their family?
Orcas live in pods, which are usually made up of several closely related matrilines. And those matrilines are led by mothers and grandmother orcas who teach the younger generations how to hunt, how to communicate, and so many other important skills. The same way that we pass traditions from generation to generation.
Just as we take care of ourselves within our families, orcas do exactly the same thing. They can pass on those traditions and that knowledge, especially where, when, and how to find those salmon that they need to survive from the older generations to the younger generations to ensure the continuing success of the orca population. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for chatting with us today about orcas and salmon and celebrating Orca Action Month. We would love to see you come down and visit us at the Seattle Aquarium so you can get even more up close and personal with some of our underwater neighbors sometime soon. Thanks so much for being with us today, Alyssa.
Of course. Thanks, everyone. We hope to see you soon, and happy Orca Action Month.
Meet Eba. She began her life as a stray puppy in California, and now she has a loving home on San Juan Island, Washington, with her people, Giles and Jim, who are whale researchers. She also has a very important job helping to save the endangered southern resident orcas. She works for Conservation Canines as a scat detection dog, using her amazing dog nose to sniff out, get this, orca poop. Through her work, Iba has been featured in all kinds of documentaries and programs, including It's a Dog's Life on Disney+. We wanted to know how to train a dog to find orca poop, so we joined Iba, Giles, and Jim to learn a little more. Believe it or not, the training starts on land. How do you find orca poop on land? Well, Iba's trainers take samples they collected on the water, put them in little containers, and then hide them so Iba can search for them. Once she smells a sample, she points her nose right at it. Then she looks up and wags her whole back end. Once she has the training on land figured out, they move to the water. Iba is perfectly comfortable on a boat, and it isn't all hard work.
Here's Iba and Cindy, hard at work.
She gets to take a little time to relax and hang out with her friends. But once it's time to work, Iba is focused on her job.
You want to find it?
Finding a sample in the water can be a bit of a challenge, and you need at least a little bit of wind.
We use a flag to help us orient. We need to have some wind in order for the scent to be carried across the water to our boat and to Iba's nose. And so, for example, if you imagine like I'm the poop, if it's a very gentle wind, the scent cone is really wide. And it's just kind of coming up and wafting around and just slowly moving maybe towards us. Whereas like you watching this video, you would be our boat moving perpendicular to the wind direction.
If the conditions are right, Jim places the whale poop sample in a floating container.
Not for the faint of heart. Let's see if it's right.
And sets it in the water while Giles distracts Iba. No peeking, Iba. Then they motor away from the sample and find their way back by following Iba's nose. Giles is watching Iba very closely and looking at the signals she is giving, and she lets Jim know which way to direct the boat.
Right there, right there.
So while we say that Iba is being trained, really she is the one training them. Once she finds the sample, it's time for her reward. Playtime!
Good girl.
Yeah, so
Of course, the big test is when they are actually out with the whales looking for fresh samples. But Iba has proven to be a real expert at finding orca poop. So far, she has helped the researchers find about 80 samples. So that's how a little puppy without a home became a Disney princess and a dog with a mission. Thanks to Iba, her humans have learned some really important information about the southern resident orcas and what needs to be done to help them survive. You can follow Iba the whale dog on Instagram and learn even more about her smelly but awesome job.
Because she's the smartest. She's the smartest one on the boat. Yeah. And the cutest one, too. We're going to keep you. Yeah, we're keeping you.
That was fantastic. All of those videos. Thank you to Katie Jones and the Seattle Aquarium and Dr. Deborah Giles with Iba. Iba couldn't be any sweeter, for one thing. But I am going to go to bed tonight thinking about Giles's poop, because I know where I can say that. That was great. I love you, Giles. We're going to take a short 10-minute break before moving into the research segment. We've got some great things planned for you this afternoon. So you can come back and get to know a little bit about the organizations responsible for supporting Orca Action Month. I want to toss it over now to Amanda Colbert, who's doing a great job of writing. Colbert. Oh, you're not the Colbert, you're the Colbert. But thank you for all of your hard work behind the scenes and orchestrating things, Amanda. take it away.
Absolutely. Yeah, so while everybody's on break, I took a little bit of time to put together a slideshow that's going to have a little tidbits about all the organizations that are part of OSA. So if you're interested to learn a little bit more about who the Orca Salmon Alliance is, who we partner with, this is going to help describe that a little bit. So it'll play on a loop a couple of times. If you want to get up, stretch your legs, get coffee, have a restroom break, just try to make sure you come back a few minutes early so that you can catch some of this wonderful stuff that a bunch of folks helped me put together. So I'll get that going and we'll see you guys in about 10 minutes.
All right, welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed your little break. We have reached the research section of our event. We have a lot of great ground to cover, and we're going to start out with a video about the Center for Whale Research and Orca Survey and how they began. So we're going to actually start out with Ken Balcom and then yours truly, Alan Budwill, interviewing him about the early days of Orca Survey and also kind of comparing with what we're seeing now. So just for way of introduction, Ken Balcom received a degree in zoology from UC Davis. He did his graduate studies at UC Santa Cruz. He's the founder and principal investigator of Orca Survey, which he began in 1976, and the Center for Whale Research, which he opened in 1985. And the center's work focuses on photo identification, demographic data, and social organization of the southern resident killer whales. So you will be seeing Ken and Alan starting in just a moment. Enjoy.
Happy Orca Month, everybody. Joining us for Orca Month, and I think every day is Orca Month for Ken Balcom. He is the founder and principal investigator for the Center for Whale Research. Happy Orca Month, Ken.
Happy Orca Month. Thank you, Alan. It's a joy to be here.
Well, I'd like people to know where you are right now and give us a hint about what you're doing for the salmon, which is so important for the orcas.
Well, right now I'm in the shade up here at the Big Salmon Ranch on the Elwha River. It's a 45-acre parcel that I saw was available, and it happens to be right between the two removed dam sites in a area of the river where the salmon are recovering. And I'm just so thrilled and want to celebrate that and be next to it. I don't want to, I was getting kind of tired of telling the story of whales declining, fish declining. I want to be on the good side of a story. And so here we are, Big Salmon Ranch.
You've been on the job for a long time now, Ken. Center for Whale Research got founded in 1985, but you've been doing Orca Survey since 1976. Would you share with people what we're about to see?
Well, what we're about to see is my reading from the log of 8th of April, 1976, where we had our first encounter with the southern resident killer whales. It was actually about 10 miles from here off Dungeness Spit. They came past Port Angeles, where we are now, and they went out the Strait of Juan de Fuca. Since then, we've learned their patterns, and this was one of their patterns. There were fish here.
Well, let's watch, and if you want to watch the video in its entirety, you can go to whaleresearch.com.
We began on April Fool's Day, 1976, with a contract to the U.S. National Marine Fisheries Service to study, it was called A Killer Whale Study in Puget Sound and Environs. That was the title of the contract. And it was from April 1st, 1976, April Fool's Day, to 30th September 76. But the government found a little extra money and kept us going through October until Halloween. Beginning in 1972, captures required a permit from the National Marine Fisheries Service that cost $100, and they had to know what the sustainable yield was, as it was argued that they came in and out of Puget Sound all the time. Nobody knew how many there were. And you have to determine what the sustainable yield or the removals could be. Mike Bigg had already done this in Canada, but his numbers were not entirely believed, or his techniques. And besides that, U.S. waters needed to be surveyed. 8th of April, 1976. We started up at 0700 and cast off at 0710 in the drizzly gloom that is typical weather for Port Angeles this time of year. At 0722, we cleared Edith's Hook and set 2850 RPM for Dungeness Spit, en route the southern Puget Sound. At 0815, when just off the middle of Dungeness Spit, I spotted killer whales, or Sinus orca, about 1.5 miles ahead and coming our way. So, begins the encounter. The initial grouping of the whales was as follows. One large group of about 25 whales was most inshore, and that group consisted of females, young whales, and not so prominent males. Several other smaller groups, consisting of a male and one or two other whales, were further offshore. It was very apparent that the whales were initially concerned with avoiding us. They dove and came up several minutes later, a good long distance astern of us, toward Port Angeles. We turned and proceeded toward the large group again, and at a distance of about 400 yards, they porpoised briefly and dove again for several minutes. Both we and the whales did not behave calmly for the first hour. Rain was spoiling our opportunities for photographs, getting our cameras all wet, and dampening our spirits. A school of Phocinoides dali had nonchalantly passed us going east without any apparent reaction from the killer whales. Now, just a side note here that at the time, this is basically a killer whale study. It was not well known that we had two ecotypes here, the meat-eating transients and a fish-eating ecotype known as residents. We sort of were just in the state of forming that knowledge at that time. At 10:30, we observed one subgroup of 22 or 23 whales that came up for about 5 blows. A downtime of 3 minutes, 24 seconds was observed, and then 15 or 16 whales came up for 6 or 7 blows. By 10:43, the school structure had loosened to 2 groups of 6 whales, each with a large male, plus a couple of whales, plus several other groups of 4 or 5 whales, each with a male, plus 3 or 4 whales accompanied by a male, plus a few others. Due to the difficulty of counting numbers of whales that do not all surface at the same time, I can only estimate the total number of whales was about 40. I shot a number of photos, PX5, frames 28 to 33, of a large male whale that had a bite-like chunk missing from the bottom third of its dorsal fin on the posterior margin. Later found this was L8. A female whale with double-notched scars on the posterior margin of her dorsal fin, PX6, frame 7, was up for 6 blows, down for 10 minutes and 35 seconds, up for 10 blows, down for 6 minutes 15 seconds, up for 10 blows, but her behavior seemed to indicate that she was not at ease with our presence. A male that was with her had no real distinctive markings. These 2 whales were presumably feeding, and they were the third flanker group from the outside, or most offshore group. Other whales began, quote, feeding also, and 2 baby whales were left in our immediate vicinity to play and look at us as their mothers were down for long periods of time. One of the babies was only about 8.5 feet long and designated Pink Baby by Camille, and the other was 10 to 11 feet long. At 1414, we were about 3 miles west of Crescent Rock and passing through areas of kelp with the whales. One male had a long string of kelp draped around its dorsal fin, and another male whale swam directly through a small patch of kelp. Do they enjoy the feel of kelp on their skin? The wind came upon us strong from the east with rain and chill. Reluctantly, we departed the whales at 15:15, about 1.5 miles offshore Twin Rivers, to return to Port Angeles while getting was good. I called Mike Big in the evening, and from my description of some of the whales we had seen, he identified the following. Male L8, close saddle, that bite on the lower third of the posterior margin of the fin. Male K5, open saddle with a chevron or sergeant stripes on the saddle pattern. L10, closed saddle with a bite mark up near the top of the dorsal fin, a posterior margin. And male K1 that had 2 notches, made by Mike Big et al. In October 1973 when they attached a radio transmitter to this whale nicknamed Taku, and then released him. He was too large for the capture travel. The transmitter was designed to release after 1 month. Mike also said that a school of whales, presumably this group, was reported inbound on the Vancouver Island side of the Strait of Juan de Fuca on Monday, 5 April. He launched from Victoria to intercept them, but apparently the whales did not follow their usual route of traveling past Victoria and up Harrow Strait. Our intercept and documentation of these whales is the first undeniable record of their presence in these waters in the month of April. Mike has records of these resident pod males for each other month of the year. So that was Encounter 1, 1976. So begins Orca Survey.
Now, how fascinating is that? Watching and listening Ken Balcomb's first encounter with the southern resident killer whales back in 1976. So Ken, we're back a little over 45 years later. Can you compare what was happening then to where we are now?
Well, what was happening then was the southern resident killer whales that we had just named along with Mike Big's collaborative study were recovering from captures for the display industry. And there were about 70 when we began. We confirmed that with Mike, and the population increased from 1976 through the 80s and then took a little dip and then increased again to almost 100. We estimate there were 120 whales before the captures, and they were on the road to recovery. And then, boom, they started a big decline, and everybody wondered why. Currently, there are 75 whales, counting the babies. And the babies in the initial years weren't counted because they had to survive a year before they got their count, because we knew there was a high mortality, and it's gone even higher. And we wondered, what is the cause of that? And the cause is lack of food. The mother can't afford to raise them. And this has happened in that period of our study where their food supply, the Chinook salmon, have basically been depleted in the Salish Sea and in the eastern North Pacific. They're maintained right now on a sort of ICU basis with hatcheries, and that's clearly not working. We need to recover wild salmon. So that's why we're here in the Big Salmon Ranch, to celebrate recovery of wild salmon. It can be done. Fix the rivers and they will come.
Thank you so much, Ken, for your important work and that message today. And I would encourage people, it's so fascinating to see your first encounter. You can go to whaleresearch.com to watch Ken's video in its entirety. So Ken, before I get tucked into bed here, did you have anything else that you would like to share here for Orca Month?
Well, yes, Alan. It occurs to me that we're not only, I mean, as we celebrate Orca Month and celebrate this recovery of salmon in the Elwha, we're looking at 2 icon species that we're at serious risk of losing. And that's bad enough, but what we're most at risk losing is our environmental compass. What direction do we want to go? Do we want to go toward this extinction program, or do we want to go toward a recovery program? It really bothers me that our political leaders, I don't hate to get political here, but our leaders and even our bureaucracies are content to lose the needle. Where do we go? What's our direction? I mean, in climate change and in salmon restoration or recovery, and in orca viability, where do we want to go? This is what, we all have to take to heart and let our leaders know that, hey, this isn't acceptable to just talk about it. We got to do something.
Thank you, Ken, for your lifelong dedication to the southern resident killer whales. You are a legend, my friend. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
So nice to hear from Ken Balcom, and thanks to Ken and the crew for letting us use his location today to celebrate Orca Action Month. We've had a few questions along the way, and I can answer part of them. First of all, if you want to go back and see like Ken's narration or Lodi Gilbert Budwill's SuperPod video, you can always visit orcaresearch.com, and Cindy and the crew will have all of that up there. Something I'll mention moving forward, during our next 4 videos on the research portion today, there will be a Q&A session following these videos that you'll be able to ask all of these people doing the videos questions. So we hope you'll stay with us for that. Our next guest speaker is Dr. Mike Ford, and he's going to share information on paternity studies of the southern resident orcas, an area of research that is still full of mystery. Mike Ford joined the Northwest Fisheries Science Center in 1995. He's been director of the Conservation Biology Division since 2003. He received his Bachelor of Science degree from Stanford University and his PhD in population genetics from Cornell University. Here he is, Mike Ford.
Hi, my name is Mike Ford, and I'm a scientist at the Northwest Fisheries Science Center in Seattle, Washington. I'm going to be talking to you today about killer whale paternity and inbreeding in the southern resident population. I'd like to acknowledge this is a collaborative effort between a number of folks at NOAA Fisheries, including Kim Parsons, Brad Hansen, Candace Emmons, Luna Park, Eric Ward, and Marty Cardos. And this is also in collaboration with Ken Balcom and his colleagues at the Center for Whale Research. So when you think about what causes extinction, it can be helpful to divide it into 2 basic types of factors. There are environmental factors, which influence the population through things like lack of food or disturbance from vessels and noise, or contaminants in the environment. And then there are also population factors, and many of these are influenced by population size. So just being a small population is inherently risky, and it can also lead to things like inbreeding, randomly skewed sex ratios that can have an influence on the population, and a lack of genetic diversity needed to adapt to changing environmental conditions. So these environmental factors and these population factors interact. You can imagine that a population could be knocked down through environmental factors, and then some of these small population factors could take over and lead to further problems. And this has been termed an extinction vortex in the way that these things could interact together. Something that we obviously would like to avoid if possible for the southern resident killer whale population. So I'm going to be talking today a lot about breeding structure, and so it's worth spending a little bit of time asking how breeding structure affects extinction risk. And breeding structure is important because it could have effects on genetic diversity. For example, if whales from different populations interbreed, that can increase diversity, and if they only breed within a population, that would decrease diversity. It can also affect inbreeding. So if relatives tend to interbreed, the population would be considered more inbred. And if they tend not to interbreed, then that would be a good thing and might result in more outbreeding. And then we're also interested in breeding structure because it could influence the opportunities for mating. So for example, if whales in the population have certain customs that limit certain types of mating, that could also potentially influence the rate of population growth. So we use genetics to study breeding systems, and this is in part because there are often big differences between the observed social breeding system and the actual genetic breeding system. And of course, it's the genetic breeding system that influences all these things like inbreeding and patterns of genetic diversity. So one kind of dramatic example of this is in the case of passerine birds, which observationally often are seen to be monogamous and were thought to be monogamous as late as the 1970s. But in fact, about 86% of the species studied genetically turn out to be polygamous. So in this case, the observed breeding system and the actual breeding system could be quite different. And of course, this could occur in a number of species as well. And one of the kind of risks, for example, of going to companies like 23andMe or other genetic companies for looking at human ancestry is finding out that your own personal history might be different than what you expected it to be. So in the case of the killer whales, the maternal pedigree in the population is well known through observational studies, and these have been conducted by folks at the Center for Whale Research and up in Canada and a number of other organizations for a period of nearly 50 years. And the reason why this works so well for the maternal relationships is that the offspring swim with their mom, certainly when they're young and nursing, and often for much of their lives. So by watching who is swimming with whom, you can determine who the moms and their offspring are. But as you can imagine, this doesn't do a lot of good for the dads because the dads typically are unknown through this sort of observational study. So that's where the genetics comes in. And here we do a basic sort of paternity analysis, very similar to what you would do in, say, a human paternity court case. And typically we have a mother whale and some of her known offspring. And if we have a genetic sample from mom and offspring and all of the potential fathers, we can use the simple rules of genetics, the fact that one copy of each gene comes from mom and the other copy comes from dad, to figure out which offspring were potentially produced by which father. So you can see in this example here, if we're looking at mom's DNA sequence, this particular part of her genetic code, she has 2 T's that she got from her own parents. And then she passed on one copy of these to each of her offspring. So in this case, each of these offspring got a T from mom. But you can see that they also got a different gene from their dad. And if we go to the dads, we can see that, for example, in this calf, of these 3 potential dads, the top 2 could potentially be the father of this calf because either one of them could have contributed an A. And if we look at this calf over here, we can see that if these are the only 3 dads in the population, it had to have been the dad in the middle because he's the only one that has a C at this particular gene. So this is the basic idea behind paternity analysis. You typically use many more genes, either dozens or potentially thousands of genes to do this much more precisely, but this is the basic idea. So in order to study the genes, you first have to collect the DNA, which means collecting tissue samples from the whales. And there's really 2 ways that, that we've done this. One way is to collect a biopsy sample with a small biopsy dart. It collects a little bit of tissue and blubber about the size of a pencil eraser. And then the other way is to collect fecal samples. And this involves following the whales and collecting the poop, basically just with a swimming pool net, and collecting DNA in that way. So let's give an example of this. So here we have K14 and her calf K42, born in 2008. And so here's a known mother-calf pair, and we're interested in knowing who the father of this calf is. So in this particular case, there are about 20 potential fathers, and they're all listed here. I'm not going to go through them all. And nearly all of these fathers were sampled in the case of this particular calf. So we have a good collection of the potential dads. And so let's figure out who the dad is. And in this case, it turns out after doing that analysis, only one of those 20 dads has a genotype, has the genes that are consistent with the calf K42. And so we can be really confident that L41, male L41, is the father of this calf K42. And it turns out L41 is also the calf of K42's brother K36, but he's not the dad of her other brother K26. And in fact, the father of K26 was not among any of the whales in our sample, which isn't too surprising because he's an older whale, and only a few of the potential dads were able to be sampled while they were still alive. So in some cases, we have neither a mother nor a father sampled. So for example, in 2013, neonate was washed up on Dungeness spit. So in this case, we don't have the mom, but we can still go through and do the same sort of process with all the potential moms and all the potential dads. And in this case, we could be quite confident that the mom was J28 and the dad was L41. So here's sort of what the big picture looks like. This is a family tree showing all of the matrilines and all of the patriline's. So the matrilines are shown in the light gray here. And so each one of these is a mom, and it shows her birth date, and then the birth dates of all of her offspring. And the moms are not labeled in this picture, just for sake of clarity. And then the dads are labeled, and it shows the dads and their birth date, and then all of their offspring. And there are a total of 8 dads in this picture, both dads that are sampled, that are labeled, and then some dads that are unsampled, and they're labeled with these stars. And so a couple things are interesting when you look at this. First of all, you can kind of see that there are 2 males, J1, born around 1950, and L41, born in the early 70s, who were clearly sort of the dominant males, if you will, at least for the group of samples that we had. So you can see that particularly if you focus on this time period after about 1990, more than half of all of the individuals in the family tree are offspring of either L41 or J1. And you can also see that there are a few other whales that have contributed, males that have contributed offspring, including J26 and K26, L57, L79, L78, and L85. But they've only contributed, at least at the time that this tree was produced, a few offspring each. And then if you go back in time, you can kind of take some guesses at males that are not part of our sample, but were sort of fecund males simply based on the half-sib relationship. So for example, this male, star 7, we'll call him, produced quite a large number of offspring born around 1990, including both J26 and K26 as an example. So one of the things that we were interested in doing this study was to ask how inbred the population is. And of all of the offspring we looked at, which was maybe about 80 or so, we found 5 that were highly inbred. And so those are listed here. And so you can see, for example, J42 had a mom, J16, which was known, and dad, J26. And that's a mother-son relationship. So J42 is highly inbred because his parents were highly closely related. Similarly, J46 was the offspring of a father-daughter mating, so also very, very highly inbred. There's a couple K animals, K34 and K33, that are each inbred, but a little less so, either half siblings or uncle niece in the case of K33. And then more recently, J52 was the offspring of J26 and J36, which is another half sib mating. And when you think about it, if you go back, I'm going to go back one slide. Actually, I can't go back one slide, I'm sorry. When you think about it, if you remember that previous slide, the two dominant males, J1 and L41, produced about half of all the offspring born after 1990. So a lot of the matings that are going to occur from 2000 on are potentially going to be amongst individuals who are half siblings. So one of the reasons why we're interested in studying inbreeding is that it could be a potentially important health marker. So inbreeding, as I think you've probably gathered from this talk already, just means mating between relatives. That could be close relatives, or some cases more distant relatives. Inbreeding leads to lower genetic diversity, and it also potentially leads to inbreeding depression, which is reduced fitness, basically reduced survival or reduced reproduction of inbred individuals compared to non-inbred individuals. And the reason for this is that all of us, humans and many other species, have lots of deleterious alleles throughout our genome. Alleles are genes that, if you have two of them together, can be lethal or can lead to lower fitness. And mostly that's not a problem, because if you are the offspring of unrelated individuals, you usually only have one copy at a particular gene of those deleterious alleles. But if your parents are highly related, the odds of you having two copies of a deleterious allele are very high, and that can lead to lower fitness. So in looking at the southern resident killer whale population, one of the things we found is that there's no real evidence of inbreeding avoidance. So one might imagine, for example, that maybe the whales have ways of knowing that they're related and would avoid mating with close relatives. And we didn't really see any evidence of that. And you can see that in this figure. The x-axis along this figure is a measure of the degree of relatedness among individuals. And if you're kind of more on the right, you're more related, and if you're more on the left, you're less related. And the black dots just show the actual matings that we observed in the population, the degree of relatedness among moms and dads. And then the gray dots is just if you sample the population randomly, what would it look like in terms of pairs of individuals. And you can basically see that the black dots and the gray dots, and it's illustrated in these curves here, are pretty much overlapping. So there's no real evidence that the actual matings are any less inbred than what they would be if the whales were just mating randomly in the population. We do have a little bit of a hint that being less inbred leads to higher survival. So this is again a kind of a graph of some degree of a measure of inbreeding and an estimate of the annual survival rate of the whales in the population. And you can see that basically if you're a little less inbred, you tend to have a slightly higher survival rate. And if you're a little more inbred, you have a slightly lower survival rate. But this gray shading around the line is the confidence interval around that line, and you can see that we're not very confident in this relationship. One of the things that we are currently doing to become more confident in some of these relationships and understand the consequences of inbreeding better is to sequence the entire genomes of all of the southern resident killer whales that we have sampled. So we have about 100 samples from southern resident killer whales, and we're sequencing their entire 3 billion base pair genome each. And then we're doing the same for about 50 individuals from other populations of killer whales throughout the Northeast Pacific in order to compare degree of inbreeding of the southern residents to some of these other populations. We're still in the process of analyzing these data, but I just wanted to show you kind of an example of what this looks like. So in this case, I'm showing a picture of the degree of heterozygosity across 3 different chromosomes for these whales. And it's just a sampling of whales. It doesn't really matter who they are in this particular example. And you can kind of see that for each of these whales, and some more than others, there are segments of their chromosomes where they basically have no diversity at all. And by examining the patterns of how big these segments are and how frequent they are, we can get a really accurate picture of how inbred each individual whale is. And by looking at what genes are contained in those segments where they have no diversity, we can also estimate the consequences of that inbreeding and how likely they are to suffer from low fitness. So, in conclusion, some of the key points from my talk today were that the study showed that the male reproductive success in the southern resident killer whale population is highly skewed, with about 50% of the recent population descended from just 2 males. We found 5 apparent cases of very close inbreeding in the pedigree, including inbreeding between first-order relatives such as parents and offspring. The consequences of that inbreeding for survival and reproduction are still under study. We have some hints that that could be a problem, but we don't really know yet. We found no evidence of inbreeding avoidance, and we found that the population has had a low effective size for at least several generations. So with that, I'll come to a close, but I thank you for listening to me today, and I think later I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much to Dr. Mike Ford and Northwest Fisheries Science Center. And yes, Dr. Ford will join us later, as will our next speaker. It's Michael Weiss. He's brought some fantastic drone video from the Center for Whale Research. Dr. Michael Weiss will tell us all about what we're seeing. He's studying killer whale social structure with the center. He got his bachelor's degree from Reed College, and he recently completed his PhD at University of Exeter. So here we are. Yeah, yay, Michael. Here's Dr. Weiss and his drone video.
So in this video, we have a few of our kind of best of 2019 drone video. In this first one, we have 3 individuals. So we have the biggest whale that you see here is J47, and the 2 smaller whales are J53 and J56. And J56 was less than a year old, and J53 is a few years old. So these whales are not super closely related. They are all within J-pod, but they're not direct relatives. But we still kind of have, it almost seems like a little bit of babysitting going on here. J56's mother, J31 rather, is not in the frame currently. We didn't actually know where she was when we were filming this, but here she comes up from the deep, and you can actually see she has a fish in her mouth. And she's joined by J46, another J17 whale. So she comes up with this fish. J56 is clearly very, very interested, and she actually bites the fish in half right about there. Leaves some of it behind that J46 goes for, along with J53. J47 continues following, kind of maybe hoping for some extra scraps. So that's potentially an example of reciprocation of the babysitting with some food sharing. In this video, we have J36 is the, or rather J37 is the female in the front, and the male behind her is J26. It's unclear exactly what's going on here, but it seemed to be some kind of courtship. J26 kind of followed J37 around for a few minutes. We actually are filming them for about half an hour, and this same kind of behavior kept going. So this could be some kind of courtship. J37 breaching there. Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting contrast to some of the more kind of high energy socializing and sexual behavior we see in a lot of these other videos. Here we have a group consisting of a bunch of K and J-pod whales traveling south along the west side of San Juan Island. That's K34 there at the edge. There's a breach. This is kind of just a travel, but with some socializing. And it's really interesting just seeing how much movement kind of within the group there is. we kind of watch them from the side and you kind of assume everything is quite steady in terms of where everybody is in the group and how they're interacting. But we actually see quite a bit of movement underwater, quite a bit of kind of mixing around, shifting positions, rolling, even in a situation here where we'd classify it as travel. Same thing here. This is actually heading up into Georgia Strait now, just with J-Pod. All of J-Pod was actually in this group other than the J16s. And again, you know, from the surface, this just looks like a bunch of fins coming up and a bunch of, you know, traveling whales. When you see underwater, you see they're actually, you know, taking looks at each other, moving around the group, quite a bit of touching and rolling, and movement within the group. There's a little bit of a copying going on there, potentially. Yeah, and you know, the water's a bit murkier here, so it's not as clear as some of our other videos, but it's quite nice. And so in this video, you have 3 J17 whales. So you have J46, J44, and J53. So J44 is the whale who just turned on his side there, followed by the other two. J53 is in the middle, and then J46 is at the top of the screen. The synchronization between these three is really, really interesting to me. The way that even in just small kinds of movements, like turning on your side while you're moving forward, they tend to kind of synchronize and behave in unison, which is really interesting. It's unclear exactly what the function is there, although it probably has something to do with signaling social relationships and social bonds. It's also just lovely to have days like this where the water rather is so clear that you can see them in such detail. So this last video is what we call a cuddle puddle, just a whole bunch of J-Pod whales, kind of all together, a lot of tactile rubbing, some sexual behavior, but for killer whales, it kind of seems like sexual behavior and social behavior are pretty interchangeable. Something I find quite interesting about this video is how central the youngest calf, J56, is to all this socialization. So J56 is the whale who just kind of got tossed a little bit just there, which is actually something we see quite a lot. She seems to kind of enjoy it a bit. Doesn't seem to be an aggressive behavior, and in fact, that was her mother who just tossed her. And you'll actually see as they kind of form this puddle, she ends up right in between a whole bunch of whales, kind of sandwiched in there. We don't know a lot about how cooperative care for young works in these killer whales, but it does seem to be a really important part of a lot of other whales' kind of lifestyles and group living. And I think that's reflected here really, really kind of nicely and beautifully by how kind of physically central the youngest calves are in these big bouts of socialization in these whales. Really just kind of laying on top of both their mom, but also other females, other members of the pod who aren't even really very closely related, all seem to kind of be drawn to these little calves. It's a really, really interesting phenomenon. No fun to code all of the various contacts in this group, keeping track of who's touching who and who's interacting, but really, really nice to watch.
Hi, everyone.
That was Dr. Michael Weiss, Center for Whale Research. That was incredible to watch that drone footage and the behaviors. Fascinating. And Michael will be joining us later for the question and answer period. And we've been covering a lot of ground here. We've been talking about the early beginnings of killer whale research, the paternity studies with Dr. Ford, the sites above the water. But what about the southern resident vocalizations under the surface? I don't have the slightest idea, but our next guest does. Monika Wieland Shields, co-founder director of the nonprofit Orca Behavior Institute, which conducts the non-invasive behavioral and acoustic research on the orcas of the Salish Sea. She's going to give us a little 411 on the southern resident orca acoustics. Monika.
My name is Monika Wieland Shields, and I'm the co-founder and director of the Orca Behavior Institute. We're a nonprofit based on San Juan Island, Washington, with the mission of conducting non-invasive behavioral and acoustic research on the killer whales of the Salish Sea. Today I'm going to give you a short tutorial about the acoustic communication of southern resident killer whales. When I first met the Southern residents, it was also around the first time permanent hydrophones were being installed at Limekiln Point State Park on the west side of San Juan Island. I was immediately taken by their unique squeaks and squeals and wondered how and what such a complex social society was communicating about. Now there are a series of streaming hydrophones online, and anyone can listen in to the whales and all the other underwater sounds of the Salish Sea at orcasound.net or through SMRU's Limekiln hydrophone. The way toothed whales or odontocetes produce sound is very different from terrestrial mammals. Most mammals make sound by passing air through their larynx, which includes what we commonly call vocal cords in humans. Odontocetes, including orcas, make most sound through their nasal passages, controlled by phonic lips on air sacs located below their blowhole. Imagine the squeaky sounds you can create by holding and manipulating the mouth of an inflated balloon, though with a much finer level of control. Odontocetes project outgoing sounds through fatty tissue in their foreheads called melons, which has a density similar to that of seawater. While they do have ear canals, they actually receive most sound through their lower jaws, which conducts incoming acoustic information directly to their inner ears. Orcas can produce 3 types of vocalizations: clicks, whistles, and discrete calls. Clicks, or echolocation, are very short, broadband sounds that the whales use to navigate or forage. While orcas have good ability to see both above and below the surface of the water, they live in murky seas that severely limit their visibility. By using echolocation, they can create an acoustic map of the world around them to find their way, find each other, and find food. Their need to do this has led to the evolution of a very advanced acoustic processing region in their brain. They can process sound in ways we can only imagine. Whistles are the most common vocalizations of most dolphins, and orcas, as the largest member of the dolphin family, also whistle. They sound to us a lot like human whistles, simple in their complexity and varying in length from less than a second to tens of seconds long. But compared to other members of the dolphin family, whistling in orcas is relatively rare. Discrete calls are the primary social vocalization of killer whales. These 1 to 2 second long pulsed calls occur in both stereotyped or variable versions. The stereotyped calls, which have been given alphanumeric designations by scientists like the whales themselves, have been documented to be stable call types for more than 60 years. Discrete calls make up the most distinct components of different dialects between different groups of whales. Dialects are defined as forms of language unique to certain social groups or regions. Some species, such as humans and orcas, have both geographic and social dialects. Orca dialects are learned by calves from the matrilineal groups in which they live. In the Northeast Pacific, all 3 ecotypes of orcas, residents, bigs, and offshores, make different vocalizations from one another. Even within an ecotype, different populations, such as the northern residents and southern residents, have completely different sets of calls from one another. J, K, and L pod of the southern residents are all considered part of one acoustic clan, meaning that they share at least some call types with one another, but each pod still uses a distinct subset of calls, allowing them to be acoustically identified. This means that when you're listening to orcas over a hydrophone, experienced listeners can determine not only which population of whales they are listening to, but often which pod or pods are present, even without seeing the whales visually. All southern resident discrete calls were categorized by the Canadian scientist John Ford. All the designations start with an S for southern resident and a number for the order in which they were identified. There are about 30 calls in total, with each pod using some but not all of the call types. The most common calls for J-pod include what I call descending or cascading calls, such as S1, S7, and S12. J-pod also makes a unique call that some say sounds like a sheep or a goat, the S4. K-pod is distinct in that many of their vocalizations are higher pitched, making them sound like kittens, especially with their S16 and S17 vocalizations. L-pod is more diverse in their common call types, with different subgroups using different calls. Most of L-pod can be identified by the S19, an ascending whistle-like call, which I'll play first. The L12 subgroup of L-pod is more easily identified by the S2 type 3 vocalization, which I'll play second. I'd like to say that superpods, when the entire southern resident community is together, are greater than a sum of their parts, because you hear a lot more call types in these highly social contexts than you usually hear when a single pod is present. You may recognize some of the call types I just played in this upcoming superpod clip, but you'll also hear many other unique sounds. Listening to something like that begs the question of what the whales are saying, bringing me back to my initial fascination with orca communication. Despite more than 40 years of acoustic research, the answer is still very much that we have no idea what they're talking about. Call types are not linked to specific behaviors, such as a certain call for "I found a salmon" or "I'm going to breach." They also aren't linked to specific behavioral contexts, such as a subset of calls used for foraging and another subset used for traveling. All I can figure is that with their big brains, specially attuned to processing sound, we're barely scratching the surface of our understanding of what information discrete calls might be carrying. It's tempting as humans to try and categorize sounds into words or letters as in human language, but it's important to remember that discrete call type categories are themselves human designations. What sounds to us like the same vocalization in actuality contains many minute differences in duration, frequency, and amplitude. So to the whales, those subtle differences might carry a lot of important information. What if a discrete call isn't a word, but an entire sentence or paragraph? It's amazing to think about what the whales could be communicating that we just can't crack into. Even though we aren't any closer to figuring out what orcas are talking about, there are still many aspects of their acoustic communication that we can study further. Here at the Orca Behavior Institute, we're taking a look at the social context of their discrete call usage, seeing if the calls that they use change depending on which whales they're communicating to. For instance, one whale that we're really interested in is L87 Onyx, to see if his call usage has changed or not changed as he's switched from L-pod to K-pod to J-pod. We're also taking a closer look at whistle communication in the southern residents, inspired in part by a project from our 2020 intern. We're currently writing up a paper for publication on whistles that should be available later this year. Finally, with Big's killer whales spending more time in the Salish Sea, we have new opportunities to look at their discrete call usage in greater detail as well. So there are a lot of topics out there for further study. I hope you'll agree with us that orca acoustic communication is one of the most interesting aspects of their behavior to study, even if we haven't yet cracked the code as to how their communication really works. My name is
All right, guys. So that was Monika Wieland Shields of the Orca Behavior Institute. And I wanted to take just a minute, not just to say a few words about her and on her behalf. She very kindly held an event for us a couple of nights ago on June 3rd. We did record that, and it is available on Orca Network's YouTube channel right now. So if you missed it, go back and take a look. It was a little different. A lot of this video that you just heard on acoustics is very scientifically driven, even though Monika has an amazing way of taking, some of those complex scientific terms and bringing them to an audience in a way that everybody can understand them. She actually did more of a storytelling speaker series for us on the 3rd, connecting these whales, underlining that family connection that we're also trying to bring to you with this month's theme of We Are Family for 2021 Orca Month. And so if you guys are interested in learning more about that, reading more about her story, she's been studying these whales since 2000. So she's going on 21 years. That's a lot of time and a lot of stories to gather and tell. She's got a really great book out called Endangered Orcas. And it's about the story of the southern residents specifically. So it's a great book that I reference for material all the time when I'm helping create educational content. It's kind of my fact-checking book. And I just wanted to take a minute to really thank her for all her contributions to Orca Month and let you folks know, pick up this book if you guys really want to know the southern residents a little more intimately. I'm going to turn it back over to Alan now.
Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, I love that book too. And Monika will join us here shortly for the Q&A session. I don't know about you, but I did not get enough of Dr. Deborah Giles and her poop talk. You know, the cute dog, Eba. So she is back. A little background on Giles. She received her PhD from the University of California, Davis back in 2014. Her master's thesis and PhD dissertation both focused on the federally listed southern resident orcas. She's a resident scientist and lecturer at the University of Washington here in Friday Harbor Labs, the science and research director for Wild Orca. And because that's just not enough, she's also scientific advisor for the Orca Salmon Alliance. So here we are again with Dr. Deborah Giles and her wonderful dog, Eba.
Hi, everybody. My name is Giles, Deborah Giles, but I go by my last name. I'm a research scientist with the University of Washington Center for Conservation Biology and the science and research director for a nonprofit called Wild Orca. I'm here with my, my companion animal and my colleague, Eba. She's a scat detection dog with Conservation Canines, which is also part of the Center for Conservation Biology. We've been studying killer whales out here in the Salish Sea, southern residents mostly, since 2007. Dr. Sam Wasser started this project on the West Coast with the endangered southern resident killer whales in 2007 in order to try and understand all of the different threats that we're facing them. By using a scat detection dog, it allows us to non-invasively collect scat samples from really far away. The dog allows us to be able to be 200 or 300 or 400 meters or even up to a mile away from where the whales left a sample. And with their very acute noses, they can take us right to it. Once we have a scat sample on board, we process it here and then put it on ice. And then eventually it goes down to Dr. Wasser's lab at the University of Washington in Seattle. And there his lab technicians and grad students analyze all kinds of things from the sample, everything from stress hormones, nutrition hormones, pregnancy hormones. So we can tell if a female is pregnant, and not only if she's pregnant, but how pregnant. And we can tell things about toxicants in the sample. So what kind of toxicants are the animals ingesting through their food? And things like PCBs, which were an industrial chemical that was banned in the early 1970s, so a really long time ago. Also things like DDT, which was an agricultural chemical that was also banned in the early 70s. Both of these chemicals are unfortunately very prevalent in the killer whale scat. And when the whales are not getting enough to eat, they end up metabolizing their fat stores, which is where those toxicants are usually stored. And when that happens, it can compromise their immune system and make them feel sick. And also we know from human studies, when you're detoxing like that, you just feel lethargic and don't feel as good as you would if you were getting enough to eat all of the time. So our studies have come out with some really interesting findings since the first paper came out in 2012, which showed that when the whales were getting enough to eat, there was no discernible effect or stress caused by vessels being in close proximity to the whales. But when the whales are not getting enough to eat, the impact of vessels is evident. Another study that came out later with so that study was with now Dr. Catherine Ayers. Another study that came out was with Jessica Lundeen, now Dr. Lundeen, and she was really interested in the toxicants or the pollutants, the pollutant aspect. And one of the interesting papers that she came out with was showing PAH or polycyclic hydrocarbons, which are essentially the smog that comes off of boats. This is not a fat soluble or a fat loving toxicant in the whales. It's something that we can look at in a shorter time frame. And what it did show is when the boats were pushed back a little bit, another 100 meters to 200 meters, that those PAH weren't shown in the whale scat anymore. And so having that extra distance that was put into effect in 2012 was a really great thing for the whales to have boats stay 200 meters away. And another more recent paper that came out was about pregnancy hormones. And so this paper showed that 69% of the females who we got scat samples on miscarried their baby before the baby was born alive, or the baby that was born possibly and died right after it was born. That's a huge number of babies to be lost before they can even be part of the population. So it's not that these females can't get pregnant, but they can't. They're not getting enough to eat in order to bring the babies to full term. And so all of these threats, whether it be vessel presence and associated noise, toxicants in the food web making their way into the whales, or the lack of quality and quantity prey, specifically Chinook salmon, out of all of these threats, definitely salmon is the biggest problem. Because without a lot of food, without having enough food every day, the other threats that are facing these whales become more of a problem. And that's exactly what we're seeing with this population of endangered killer whales now. So I strongly encourage anybody watching this video or participating in other Orca Month activities, get involved, learn as much as you can, and pass that information on to your friends and family. Maybe organize a beach cleanup or anything like that. You know, these very small behaviors that individuals take on really do have a pretty profound impact on our natural world. And the more people that get educated about what's happening with these whales, we're just creating a big group of people, a big army for the southern residents to do what's right and try and turn back the clock a little bit and undo some of the damage that we humans have caused to these whales. Because ultimately, when you think about it, if we're saving these whales, it means we're saving ourselves as well. With a healthy population of southern resident killer whales, it means that we've done some great things to reverse some of the damage we've done to the environment throughout their entire range from Monterey, California, all the way to Southeast Alaska. So thanks for watching, and I think I put my dog here, Eva to sleep. You can follow Eva on Instagram. It's Eva, EBA, the whale dog, and we'll be posting her work effort and samples that we collect over the summer.
That is great, Giles. Thank you so much. And no, you didn't. You may have put Eva to sleep, but not us. If you're like me, and I know I am, you probably have some questions after all of these great speakers. And so through the miracle of Zoom technology, which is quite troubling. We're going to do a little Q&A session, and fortunately, Amanda Colbert will be facilitating this. We hope to have Dr. Mike Ford, Monika Wieland Shields, and Michael Weiss and Giles here. So, okay, we're doing well. I'll leave it with you, Amanda.
All right, perfect. Are we waiting for Mike and Michael? There we go, Michael Weiss. We'll see.
We don't have Mike Ford yet, so
Okay.
go ahead and just get started and he'll jump on.
All right. Well, first I want to thank all of you for your wonderful videos, even with keeping abreast on a lot of these topics and issues. I swear every time I hear all of you talk, even if it's the 12th time, I learned something new. So I'm sure everybody that's joined us today on the webinar is getting a load of information from you. So thank you for that. The first question I have queued up in the Q&A, and for the folks in the audience, if you would like to ask questions to our panelists, please post your question in the Q&A box, not the chat. It's going to be a little difficult for me to shuffle back and forth, so I want to be able to find and ask your question. That's the best place for it. This first one is from Mindy Roberts. It says, with the focus on males in the early survey notes, was the thinking that the groups were led by males with a harem at the time? And when did researchers realize that these are matrilineal pods and the roles of grandmothers? So I think Mike Ford or Michael Weiss or Giles or whoever wants to talk about that probably can. Not everybody all at once.
I'll just say I'll give a partial answer because I'm not as sure about the history in the resident whales specifically, but there still is a bias now, but especially historically a bias towards thinking animal populations are male dominated, and that you have a dominant male in a harem. I think the best example of this in the whale world is with sperm whales, right? The thought was, when you read Moby Dick, the thought was you have the big alpha male who has his harem of females. We now know that that's not true. Sperm whales, like killer whales, are matrilineal. They live in female-centered societies, and in sperm whales, the males disperse and go off and do their own thing, unlike in the killer whales. I'm not sure specifically. If I know that some older notes on killer whales assume that you had a big male and a harem, but maybe folks who know a little bit more of the history might be able to talk to if and when that kind of shifted in the residence.
I don't know enough about the history to address that, but the one thing I will just mention is that sort of genetically they are a little bit like what you just described, and that you do tend to have these older, larger males doing most of the breeding, and so like a lot of mammalian populations, the variance in reproductive success is much higher among the males than it is among the females. I also think and I would defer to Giles or someone who spends a lot of time on the water, but the males are also just a lot easier to see. I think they're more so.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think some of the early focus on the males had to do with them being easier to identify. The fin shapes and the markings are easier to pick out among the crowd of other fins, especially when we were just learning about the identification. And I imagine that, it was over the course of the late 70s and early 80s, just when they started figuring out for sure that we had kind of two different ecotypes here, two separate populations with the fish eaters and the mammal eaters, and started documenting births and the association of individuals with their mothers over time. That's when the shift really happened in our understanding.
Yeah, I just to add to that, I'm always impressed by when I think about the pedigrees, I guess you could call them, or the family trees that Mike Big and Ken put together. They were pretty darn accurate early on, which is fascinating. They were able to pick out those whales that were family members, and we've got the genetics to show that now too. And of course, the social groupings are well known among a lot of people now, but I am always impressed to think back about those early days when the studies were first starting, that they were pretty darn accurate. So kind of cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for your responses. This actually kind of leads into a little bit where you guys were talking about how the males just seem to be easier to see on the water. So a question that came in was from Gary, and it says, I've often wondered what causes the bite marks on the dorsal fins. So do you guys want to talk about how they get those unique notches and scrapes and scars?
I have a fun story about it, which probably tells a little bit of how they get it. I was on Brad's boat, the NOAA boat, a number of years ago. I think it must have been about maybe 2010 or 11. And we were trying to place a suction cup tag on one of the animals. And it's much easier to place suction cup tags on the animals when they're socializing. They don't seem to be bothered or notice the boat, really, quite honestly. And we had this one case. There's a fabulous picture of it too. If I can find it, I'll post it to the chat. But we came upon J27 and his little brother J39. And right after we came fairly close to them, where you could, and it was beautiful water, you could see right through the water. And we realized that J39 was literally attached to the back end, the trailing edge of J27's dorsal fin. And J27 was just dragging him through the water. And so he was just hanging on, like going for a ride. It was really wild. And then at one point, J39 left his brother and came over. And we stopped our boat, and he came right over and hovered just below the surface of the water for a good minute or so, just staring up at the boat. It was really, really interesting, but it makes me obviously that was a gentle experience, but I think they play pretty roughly together. But so that's just a personal experience that I had of actually seeing somebody hanging on to the back end of somebody else's dorsal fin, which was fun.
Yeah, I would just add to that from the drone video, during like Giles was saying, during these high intensity social interactions, you'll see a lot of cuddling and it'll get more and more intense, and you will just see someone try to bite another whale, and sometimes successfully. So like Giles was saying, it happens during socialization. It might occasionally be actual, intense aggression. I think it could be a little bit of both. From what I've seen in the drone videos, when they're really trying to do high impact aggressive interactions, that tends to be more fluke strikes and stuff that could cause broken bones and less biting. We actually have a master's student who's working on quantifying aggression through looking at rake marks at the moment. And what it looks like so far is the whales that really get scratched up the most are the young whales. They really get a lot of scratches when they're kids, which probably has to do with the fact, like I said in that video, that they're really central in all of these high intensity social interactions. So they're getting all of the interactions, including the bites, potentially.
Well, so, orcas don't have arms like we do. So is there a thought process behind the possibility of like disciplining the young ones? Like that's kind of mom's only way to, keep them in order a little better, teach them the ropes. All right, great. The next question is coming from Steve. It says, do orca grandfathers perform distinctive roles versus the orca fathers? So whoever wants to take that.
So I'll just say there's not a lot of paternal care in killer whales as far as we know. From my perspective, the older males certainly play an interesting role. I don't know if it's necessarily a grandfather role, but folks who spent more time on the water with J1 could probably speak to a little bit kind of what his particular role was, but he seemed to be pretty special.
Yeah, like Michael said, I don't think there's a lot in the way of paternal care in terms of your paternal offspring, but we do see a lot of care of the males to other, related young whales within their family groups or within their pods. So we see, the older brothers, the uncles, that kind of thing, participating in babysitting behaviors to younger family members, but not necessarily their own offspring, unless maybe you're J26.
All right, you guys want me to move on to the next one? All right, this question is specifically for Mike Ford. It says, is there evidence that northern residents avoid inbreeding?
I think it's probably equivocal. There was a study, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago that Lance Barrett-Leonard up in Canada did, looking at paternity in northern residents, and found that there was a tendency to not breed within matriline. But that study's pretty old. The sample size was not really huge. And I think it would be hard, kind of hard to tell the difference between, it's also a large enough population that kind of distinguishing really between true avoidance versus just, random mating would be difficult. So I would guess that it's kind of equivocal right now.
All right, and while I have you, there was another one directed specifically for you as well. And it says, what indicators will you use to understand what impacts of inbreeding are to the whales? What are the next steps in that research?
Yeah, so there's really two things. The first is to accurately understand the degree to which the population as a whole and each individual whale is inbred. And so right now we're doing that in two ways. We have the pedigree, which allows us to, identify, in this case, like 4 or 5 cases of really close inbreeding. And then we'll have the whole genome sequence data, which will allow us to basically get an index of inbreeding for every single whale. And then we can do two things with that. We can, correlate it basically with performance in some way. So either reproduction or survival or growth or that kind of thing. And so we've done some of that, and we'll do more of that as we have more of the genomic data. That's not a super powerful way to study inbreeding depression because there's not that many births and there's not that many deaths. And so the sort of statistical power to do that is not really high. So I think the more powerful way is to use the genomic data directly. And what we're doing there is basically looking at the incidence of basically deleterious alleles that are present in individuals in the southern resident population at higher frequencies than you see in other populations. So we go kind of directly to the genomic data and make the inference that way.
So, listening to Giles going over the samples that EBA is collecting and determining pregnancy rates and miscarriage rates, and then listening to you talk a little bit about this inbreeding, how are you guys going to be able to determine, I guess whatever the percentage of split is, like, it's compounding, right? Because if they don't have food, they're struggling with pregnancies anyway. So how are you going to really figure out the difference between the food piece and then the inbreeding piece if both are kind of going on at the same time?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I'm not sure you can, tease it out exactly to the nth degree. I think that there are some limits to what you can determine. I do think the comparison among populations is potentially powerful. So for example, if the southern residents are markedly more inbred and appear to have more of these deleterious alleles in the population than say the northern residents or whales from Alaska or so forth, to me that would be kind of an indicator that inbreeding is likely to, could be a reasonable explanation for the difference in performance between those two groups. Obviously, so the problems with some of those comparisons is that, you have other differences as well. They may have less access to food and so forth, but that'd be, I guess, my short answer. And I think as you sort of led up to in your question, these things likely circle and interact.
Sure.
I had to add that, and Mike, you could verify this, but this very, very close inbreeding within families is new. We don't have evidence of that from what I can tell. And again, please correct me if I'm wrong about that, but this seems to be more of a new phenomenon. And I always think back to the time, I think it was 2016, when we had the J16s, only the J16s in the inland waters for weeks at a time. And so it's kind of one of those things, and we had low abundance of fish, so we didn't have fish to bring not even other matrilines of the same pod into the inland waters, let alone other pods here like we used to. And so it always occurs to me that it's kind of like, love the one you're with, which is kind of creepy. And I probably couldn't have said that. But like they're very tactile animals, and they are, and if that's all that's there because the food can't support more animals, then that's seems like something to consider.
Makes sense. All right, the next question isn't directed to anyone, so anybody jump in here, but it says, have any of you seen behavior that indicates the orcas are reacting to drones?
That's a great question. So we watch very closely to see if there's any reaction of the whales to the drones. So we're always watching the behavior of the whales before we launch a drone, and we continue watching them as we launch the drone towards them, and we're watching them from above to see if they're reacting. I think the closest thing I've seen that could be any kind of reaction is maybe a quick look up, so a quick turn on the side, which then goes back to normal behavior. I've never seen any real big change in direction or really anything that could be necessarily surface active behaviors in response to the drone. And I think this is a really important point about how we operate the drones over the whales. So we have a minimum height that we can be, so we have to be at least 100 feet above them. We tend to try to stay a little bit over to the side, not directly on top of them, depending on lighting and the situation. And our protocol is that if we do notice a whale doing something that's clearly a response to the drone, that we stop observing that whale for the rest of the day, or that group of whales if it's a group level response. So we've never observed any real behaviors that indicate the whales are responding strongly to the drone. We know from studies on other dolphins that at lower altitudes, other marine mammals will respond to drones. So the main thing to keep in mind is that it's quite a small thing in the sky, and actually the noise it's creating is much quieter than a boat engine, and it's not in the water, so sound doesn't transmit very well between air and water. So when you put a hydrophone in the water under a drone that's 100 feet up in the air, there's very little in the way of a acoustic signal that's actually being received. But it's something we're very aware of and very much watching as we do these operations.
I haven't been behind the camera. I've been on the boat when Michael has launched the drone from our boat in the past. And then I've watched John and Holly, the other researchers, using drones in this region for years now. And from the side view, I can definitely tell you that I've seen much more response, back when the original aerial photos were being taken from a helicopter. The whales definitely reacted to that. And I've actually seen other, like one case stands out in my mind when of all things, a Coast Guard helicopter flew really, really low, dangerously low to the whales. And there was spy hopping behavior and then a quick exit from the area by all, a long dive and a quick exit out of the area. And so it's not that aerial craft can't impact the whales, but I don't see it from drones like I have from other larger aircraft.
All right, Monika, I have a couple questions for you in the chat. So I'm going to kind of combine them because I think one will kind of lead into the next. The first one was talking a little bit about the echolocation and how the southern residents can tell specific fish species from each other. And then that can kind of lead into, can these orcas adapt to a different food source?
Yeah, so in terms of determining fish species, I think there's some evidence that they use like the air bladders in the fish to determine which species they're sort of sounding off of. And then they're probably also getting signals on the size and shape of the fish and, what depth the fish are at, whether they're schooling or individual, those kinds of things. I'm sure they have a much deeper knowledge than we do about the fish behavior and where they're likely to encounter specific species that they're targeting. In terms of the prey question, I think physically we know that they're capable of taking other types of prey. There's There's some legends out there that they're not capable of taking down marine mammals, but we know with the southern residents specifically that sometimes they harass and even kill porpoises. So it's something that they are capable of doing. But I think the prey shifting question really comes down to more a cultural difference that, you know, the big killer whales on the southern residents, everything about the way that they associate their family histories, how they move through their environment, you know, their acoustic communication, everything about who they are surrounds what they eat. The big killer whales need to generally be in smaller, quieter groups. They're, you know, more stealthy in a lot of their behaviors, so they can successfully hunt their marine mammal prey. Southern residents, you know, historically have had very abundant salmon runs to depend on, and they don't need to be in those quiet, small groups. They can, you know, be in these large extended family groups, very vocal, very active at the surface, and still successfully hunt what they co-evolved with, which was abundant Chinook salmon. And so asking them to switch to, you know, switch to marine mammal prey or something like that, I always kind of say it's like asking them to give up who they are. They're everything about their culture and how they behave and how they interact with their family groups. And so I don't think it's so much a physical difference in terms of what they're able to detect or capture or kill in the marine environment as sort of their cultural history and what they've evolved to do and who they've evolved to be. And you know, we have seen from some of the recent prey papers that they do take species other than Chinook salmon, other fish species, and so they have some ability, you know, to switch among the salmonid species, but it really comes down to, you know, what their history is and what they co-evolved to eat, and that's why they're so dependent on those abundant Chinook salmon runs in particular.
And that's a great segue into this next question for you as well. You mentioned that bigs were increasing their presence in the Salish Sea, and this individual would like you to talk a little bit more to why that might be.
Yeah, again, I think primarily it probably comes down to prey, where when studies on orcas in the Salish Sea kind of really began in the 1970s, it was also following not only the live captures of orcas, but also culling of a lot of seals and sea lions in the area, and marine mammal populations in general were a lot lower. And with the protections that have been put into place under the Marine Mammal Protection Act in the 70s, you know, sea lion populations have rebounded to at or even potentially above some of those historic levels. We've seen porpoise populations increase as well. And so I think the whales go where the food is. And the Salish Sea is a really abundant place for all types of marine mammals now. And so the recovery of the seals and sea lions and porpoises has brought the big killer whales back. Whereas the corresponding, you know, crashing of a lot of the Chinook salmon runs, especially, you know, we're seeing it right now with the Fraser Chinook, the spring runs being so low and the southern residents not being here like they used to be this time of year. And so I think, you know, I'm sure there's some other factors, and there's some interesting things we speculate about potential interactions between the two populations and their usage of the habitat. But I think it's pretty clear that prey is the primary driving factor, and lack of salmon is lack of southern residents, and lots of pinnipeds and porpoises means lots of big killer whales.
Does anybody want to add anything to that before we go to the next question? Good. Okay. This one is actually for Giles. Debbie is interested on how Eba got her name. Is there a story behind that?
Well, when I adopted her from my sister, who's the one that found her wandering the streets of Sacramento, my sister named her Binky, so she needed a new name right away. The name comes from my husband Jim's mother studied African culture for quite intensively when they were kids, and there's an Igbo language in a tribe in Africa, and they used to have a dog named Ebo, a boy dog named Ebo, and so when we got Eba, I just really like the shortness of it and the tightness of that name, but she's female, so we just added an A at the end, so it's a made-up name. It doesn't mean anything yet. And we'll see.
Well, it's cute. It definitely suits her individuality.
Mm-hmm.
All right, last couple questions. This one's for the whole group, and we get asked this quite a bit as well, but Joan wants to know, I wonder about the use of the title killer whale for animals I know as orca. I thought killer whale had gone out of use long ago. Is this the title used collectively by scientists, or can you comment?
Michael, I thought you were going to jump in there. You looked excited about that question.
I love this question. I call them killer whales because they're whales that are good at killing things. And, you know, they're a lot more than that. They're also, you know, intelligent and social and all these other things, but they are tippy top predators also. So I don't look at killer whale as an insult or as derogatory. I think of killer whale as recognizing their position as the absolute tippy top predators, just kind of like we have been, although might want to move ourselves down a couple trophic levels, but how humans have reshaped ecosystems through predation, killer whales can also reshape ecosystems through predation. So I use killer whale because I like recognizing that part of what they are.
Yeah, I'd add on to that a lot of the official population names include the word killer whale. Southern resident killer whale is kind of their official designation. And so I use the terms orca and killer whale interchangeably. Some people, you know, think that orca is sort of a kinder way of referring to them. But the Latin name Orcinus orca is sort of, you know, something like devilfish of the underworld anyway. And so it's also referring to their predatory ability and isn't necessarily a friendlier depiction of them. So I think they are still commonly referred to as killer whales among scientists and in the literature. And I think orcas and killer whales are interchangeable in both acceptable terms.
When this question comes up, I always think back to a conversation I had with Robin Baird in the middle of the Strait of Georgia one time. And I hardly ever use the word orcas, but so it came up and I was asking him what he thought about that. And he says he loves this question as well. And he says, well, you know, it's what we called them. They became known as killer whales or whale killers because, you know, early recorders of this species called them whale killers. And then in translation to English, it became killer whales. But he said, you know, I just always think that if we're going to rename killer whales, we need to rename right whales because they're not the right whales to kill anymore. And we need to rename sperm whales because they don't have sperm filling their head cavity. And, you know, we just can go through the list. And so I always think of that with Robin's voice in my head. And I pass that on as often as possible. It's not meant to be derogatory in any way. It's just what we have come to know them as. And I think I'll continue to call them killer whales. Probably forever.
All right. The last one that I have queued up right now says, how concerned are you? And if so, what are you doing about the threat the Trans Mountain Pipeline poses in terms of increased tanker traffic noise and water pollution?
I can start. Of course, it's something to be incredibly concerned about. The fact that in Valdez, Alaska, you can still dig down into the sand and find oil. They're still having impacts from that oil spill decades ago. The potential for oil spills it obviously increases as we're moving oil through the region. And it's something that I think that we really do need to be learning more about and focusing more on as a community right here, where those ships are going to just pass all the time, and getting more involved. There are a number of different organizations in Canada. The Marine Coast Coalition is involved in this. In the US, there's Friends of the San Juans, among other groups. I would strongly encourage we as a community to get more involved in this issue. The potential for harm is high.
Does anybody else want to speak to that?
Well, I'll just mention, yeah, I mean, I agree. Obviously, there's a lot, any increase in boat traffic is something that needs to be, is a cause for concern. The Canadian government is funding quite a bit of research designed to evaluate the potential effects of that traffic. So that's not to say that that's a good thing that there'll be increased traffic, but just to mention that the government is funding quite a bit of research on it.
Awesome. Well, guys, I'm really glad that you were all able to join us live. We did go through those videos rather quickly, so it was nice to have Q&A queued up through the chat so that I could ask you guys all these burning questions everybody had during your presentations. I'm going to turn it back over to Cindy and Alan, but I certainly appreciate you being here today and all you all are doing for Southern resident killer whale research and just holding them in your hearts the same way that we do. So thank you.
Yes, thank you to everybody. Well done, Amanda. And yeah, thank you to all the panelists. Such great interaction. It was great to see you guys talking together. And it was fun watching the little windows on the screen because it would be like if the Brady Bunch had gotten PhDs. So we're going to take a 10-minute break, but I would encourage you to stay with us. We're going to zoom around the world with orcas. We've been talking about the southern resident killer whales, but we have a collection of videos, brief videos from around the world of orcas. So we'll visit that after a 10-minute break. So stay with us.
Yep, and I'm going to get that same slideshow queued up that we did for the last 10-minute break. So once you guys are done stretching your legs and grabbing some more coffee, come back, learn a little bit more about the Orca Salmon Alliance and our participating partners that have helped bring Orca Month together for this great event.
We are back. I am Alan Budwill and Cindy Hansen here at the Center for Whale Research in downtown Friday Harbor. We are back to get ready to zoom around the world with orcas. I was fascinated listening to all those calls after Monika, Wieland, Shields. I'm trying to figure out, were they talking about us? I hope not. So we've seen a lot of southern resident killer whales. We're about to travel around the world with orcas of the day. We have several videos from orca communities around the world that they were kind enough to share and talk about some of the differences. The following videos are of AT1 transients. Did I say that right? Thank you. In Alaska by Craig Matkin of the North Gulf Oceanic Society. We have Orcas in Norway by Yves Jordan of the Norwegian Orca Project. Orcas of Iceland by Philippa Samara of the Icelandic Orca Project. Orcas of the UK by Rob Lott of Whale and Dolphin Conservation. Orcas of Russia by Eric Hoyt of the Far East Russia Orca Project. And Orcas of Gibraltar, we're really zooming around the world, by Ruth Esteban of the Madeira Whale Museum. Before we get there though, Cindy, you wanted to add something?
I did. So I'm going to push Alan. Just want to mention these are all short little 5-minute videos, and some of them we do have longer versions of those videos. We didn't have time to show them in their entirety today, but we will have those available through our website at orcamonth.com. So you'll be able to watch the entire thing or the shorter version, whichever you prefer. But these are all little 5-minute videos. They're absolutely fascinating, and the fact that all of these people took time out of their busy research to create these videos for us, we're just really, really appreciative. And they're just absolutely amazing with a lot of great information. One other thing I did want to mention, the first video that you're going to see about the AT1 transients, some of you may be familiar with their story. It's pretty heartbreaking. Also a really good call to action for those of us working with the southern residents and other orca populations around the world. But one of the things that Craig Matkin will be mentioning in that presentation is this book, Integrate Silence. And some of you probably have read this. If you have not, it's an absolute must read for anybody who cares about orcas. It's an absolutely beautiful story written by Eva Salidas about these AT1 transients and what they are struggling with. So if you have not read it, highly recommend it. So I'll turn it over to Amanda to start our videos. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Craig Matkin. I'd like to give a little bit of an update on the AT1 transients in Alaska. They're these unique killer whales that are on the brink of extinction and that we may have a few lessons to learn from. These Chugach transients are very limited. Prince William Sound is where they center their range, and then down into Kenai Fjords, really just the northern part of Kenai Fjords in this region. They've never been photographed anywhere else. And the relationships of these AT1 or Chugach transients to the rest of the transients on the west coast is unique. And here they are. This is with nuclear DNA, looking at the female inheritance, and you can see they're off on their own little arm here. This is genetic distance that is indicated by these lines. I've got to play some calls of these guys because they are like no other killer whale calls you'll ever hear. And it's like a language from a native tribe going extinct. And there's some beautiful native languages in Alaska, the Eyak tribe, that happens to be the same geographic area as these AT1 transients, has a unique and beautiful language. And these transients, these Chugach or AT1 transients, also have a unique language. A series of calls. So the population decline The Exxon Valdez oil spill was a big part of the decline, a recent decline anyway. 9 deaths, right following the oil spill of what were 22 animals in the population, very small to begin with. The whales were observed in contact with the oil. They probably inhaled oil was the main way that it killed them. But there's also ingestion of oiled seals. They were really easy prey, and they were eating oiled seals. And this is what's happened with the population. It's gone from the 22 animals at the beginning of the study and a new calf to down to 7. We lost more animals after the spill. These were older males, yeah, some of them were seen in the spill, so it may have been effects that were carried over the years. But yeah, it's been 7 animals in the group now for over a decade, and it's amazing. None of them have died. Unfortunately, the females are probably all too old to have calves, and for some reason they just never reproduced after the spill. I invite everybody to read Into Great Silence, Eva's book on the early days of this study, and what it means, what extinction means. And I think that's something that we need to sit back and consider, because these animals, as you heard from the calls, are so unique, and the genetic information they carry is so unique. And not to carry this forward, it just reduces the variability in the overall world of killer whales in a way that you don't know what the future is going to bring, and genetic variability and is important, and all these smaller populations may be the answer to future issues that they may face, and the variability and potential to adapt that comes with that. So I think we just need to sit back and realize that the extinction of these tribes, just like I think extinction of some native tribes and some of what they had to offer, and their culture at any rate, has been detrimental to our moving forward, as we're realizing now, and we look at the way we live in the world. So I just invite you to think about that, and perhaps read Into Great Silence if you haven't already. So that's, I think, what I want to leave it at. I'm hopeful these animals will live a long, long lifetime, and we'll see. To see them at all is a treat, and I thank you very much for listening.
Orcas are found in all of the world's oceans, with regional populations differing in their population size, diet, behavior, lifestyle, and the specific threats they may face. The more knowledge is available on these populations, the more work can be done towards their conservation. In Norway, orcas are found in large numbers, especially in the winter when they follow the herring migration into the fjords above the Arctic Circle. Orcas have been studied during this winter month since 1986. Each winter, the same orca groups return to feed on herring. These groups use remarkably specialized techniques to efficiently feed on herring. You may have heard of the so-called carousel feeding. In this technique, orcas work as a team to herd the herring into a tide bowl close to the surface. Once the bowl is tight enough, they use their special weapon. They charge the edges of the bowl and deliver a powerful tail slap that stuns the herring. This way, they can just pick and eat the stunned herring one by one. Until recently, the assumption was that Norwegian orcas mainly feed on herring all year round. But with all the different prey types found in the Norwegian Sea, this was hard to believe. Well, actually, it turns out no one had been researching orcas outside of the winter months in Norway before. This is exactly why the Norwegian Orca Survey was created, to document orcas' diet and ecology in all seasons in Norway, and also to re-establish the long-term photo ID project initiated by colleagues in the late 80s. Since 2013, we have been able to maintain our efforts at sea not only in the winter but in all seasons, doing photo ID, biopsy sampling, and tagging. We have identified and cataloged over 1,200 orcas, all apparently adopting various diets. Most orcas were visiting the coastal fjords in the winter to feed on herring, but while most of them left the area with the herring, some groups also remained in the north and switched diet. We found that seals were an important food source for some groups. In contrast with other regions, seal-eating orcas in Norway seem to adopt a mixed diet that also includes fish. They also commonly interact and travel with other orcas that may have a different diet. Perhaps our most astonishing discovery was that several groups feed on lumpfish, or lumpsucker. This fish had never been documented as prey to Norwegian orcas before. But why is this such a special finding? Well, if we have a look at a lumpfish, we realize that there's not a lot of tissue to feed on. In fact, this is not what orcas are after. This is what they take, the eggs, or caviar. The whales are actually opening the fish, emptying it for its eggs, and then dropping the fish carcass, which can be picked up and be a great entertainment for youngsters. All this is without mentioning all other surprises and amazing encounters orcas gave us. But there is still much to learn about orcas in Norway. In the coming years, we are hoping to learn more about their health and the trend of this population so that we can help protect them.
Hello everyone, my name is Rob Lott and I work for Wieland Dolphin Conservation here in the UK. As an island nation, we're incredibly blessed to have a rich marine environment with one of the longest coastlines in the whole of Europe. 28 species of whales, dolphins and porpoises have been recorded in our waters. The most commonly sighted species are harbour porpoise and bottlenose dolphins, but if you head to the north off the coast of Scotland, there's a chance to encounter our resident or semi-resident pods of orcas. The West Coast community of orcas, which, as their name suggests, are most often encountered on Scotland's west coast around the Hebridean Islands. This is a tiny population of just 8 individuals, though in recent years only these 2 males have been spotted with any regularity and positively identified. The male with the big notch out of the trailing edge of his dorsal fin is the legend that we know as John Coe. He was an adult when he was first spotted in 1980, which makes him one of the oldest, if not the oldest, wild male orcas on the planet today at around 60 years of age, or maybe more. Most summers, John Coe and the other male here, Aquarius, are seen off Scotland, but for the past few years they seem to take off and do a grand tour of the island of Ireland and have been spotted off the southwest Irish coast and the west coast of Wales as they make their way back up north through the Irish Sea. These guys are marine mammal eaters. For several years, I had regular reports of John Coe passing the headlands of Pembrokeshire in southwest Wales, almost on exactly the same day in early June. This is a struggling population though, and no calves have been observed in the group in over 20 years. Tragedy struck in the first few days of 2016 when this adult female from the population known as Lulu was washed ashore dead on the Hebridean Isle of Tiree, her body entangled in fishing rope. A necropsy revealed that levels of PCB contamination in Lulu were incredibly high. They were 20 times higher than the safe levels that we would expect for cetaceans to be able to manage. That puts her as one of the most contaminated animals on the planet in terms of PCB burden, and does raise serious questions for the long-term survivability of this group. These chemicals were banned from Europe in the 1970s, but are still in the marine environment and upper atmosphere today. Lulu came from a tiny population. She had a name and experienced a deeply unpleasant death. Unfortunately, her death was directly or indirectly caused by human impact. Every year, in May, WDC takes part in an Orca Watch event in the far north of Scotland, and this coincides with the time that we welcome our Icelandic visitors. Nobody knows exactly why, but 33 individuals who have been identified from an Icelandic orca catalogue of over 430 individuals make the 1,000-mile journey across the North Atlantic from Iceland, where they feed on herring, to Scotland, where they switch prey and target seals. And none are more famous than this matriarch Musa, who was first identified in 1999 in Iceland and then spotted in Scotland in 2008. She has been seen back each season since with her pod in Scotland. This is most likely a cultural tradition that Musa learned from her mother and now extends to her offspring, Guna, Summer and Tide. Musa has again this year already been spotted back in the area just in April. Another famous Icelandic orca, this time a male known as Hulk, also regularly makes the trip to Scotland. Further north again, to the outer realm of the British Isles, you will find the Northern Isles of Orkney and Shetland, which appear to host a thriving community of orcas. Orcas can be seen here at any time of the year. The more regularly encountered pods are known as the 64s, which comprises of 4 individuals, the 65s group, which is a group of 6, and the 27s pod, which currently has 8 members. Until relatively recently, the 64s and the 65s were one group, but have recently split for reasons that remain unclear. Maybe it was the death of a matriarch, or because they'd reached their natural maximum group size for hunting seals and are now more effective as smaller units. This video is from early July 2020 and shows the 27th pod on the lookout for seals and porpoises. Interestingly, this pod has made the Scotland-Iceland shuffle in reverse. As in 2017, the 27s were observed hunting harbour porpoise off the north coast of Iceland. Further offshore again and out into deeper UK waters, fishing trawlers often report large pods of orcas following the mackerel migration each October. So that's a brief overview of the orca scene here in the British Isles, but no matter where these majestic creatures roam, home for a wild orca is with each other. Many thanks for your time.
Hi everyone, my name is Filipa Samaja, and I'm the founder of the Icelandic Orca Project, the longest-running research program investigating the orcas of Iceland. Our monitoring program aims to better understand the ecology and behavior of this population to ultimately work towards its conservation. So let me take you from the Pacific Northwest to the Atlantic Ocean and an island nation called Iceland. In Iceland, orcas are seen most regularly in the west and in the south coast. These areas are important habitat for herring, which is the main prey of orcas in this region. We find new individuals occurring along the Icelandic coast almost every year. The first edition of our Photo ID catalog in 2017 included over 400 individuals. We know that this number has gone up by now. While many whales are seen very regularly, others are sporadic visitors, or even only seen once. Of the whales that are seen regularly, we find individuals with very different habits. For example, some orcas seem to stay around the Icelandic coast year-round. Others travel seasonally to Scotland, spending the winters in Iceland and the summers in Scotland. From visual observations and analysis using chemical markers of diet, we know that some whales appear to specialize on eating herring, following its annual migration around different regions of Iceland. However, other whales have a more generalist diet that includes both fish and marine mammals, like seals or small cetaceans. In Iceland, orcas often come together in large aggregations of 50 to 100 or even more whales to feed on herring. Herring is a schooling fish that swims rapidly, so feeding on it requires teamwork. The whales use a coordinated group feeding technique called carousel feeding, where they encircle the schools of herring and then use their tails to slap the herring. The herring get kind of stunned, and this allows the whales time to pick on it one by one. Often we see stunned herring just floating at the surface, and numerous seabirds take advantage of this easy prey provided by the orcas. The social structure of the orcas in Iceland seems to be less hierarchical than that of fish-eating whales in the Pacific Northwest, such as residents. And interestingly, we see that when they come together in these large aggregations, they associate and socialize regardless of their differences in travel patterns or diet. Orcas in Iceland mostly vocalize when they are feeding or socializing and tend to travel in silence. But they produce some pretty unique sounds, from low-frequency calls used to herd the herring to very high-frequency whistles, beyond what us humans can hear. Their most distinctive call is the herding call. Just listen. It's a long and low-frequency call that is particularly interesting because it is produced not for communication with other orcas, but to cause an effect on the fish. The herding call makes the herring herd together tightly and is generally produced just before a tail slap, meaning the whale can hit more fish with a single tail slap. It's a remarkable tool to make feeding on a schooling fish way more efficient. There are still many open questions about orcas in Iceland. Finding the answers will require time following the lives of these whales. Continuing our dedicated research will allow us to better understand many aspects of their lives and the consequences of future environmental changes. You can follow our journey of discovery and find out more about Icelandic orcas by visiting our website or getting in touch with us. Thank you.
2021 is the 22nd year for the Far East Russia Orca project, FARUP. Along with Alexander Burden and Hal Sato, I co-founded the project in 1999 and have stayed on as co-director. These days, Olga Filatova and Tatiana Ivkovic have been leading the field teams. I'm pleased to say that the FARUP team has managed to visit the Russian Far East, including Arctic waters, every summer since 1999, including in last year's pandemic summer. And in fact, Olga and Tanya, along with Ivan Fedutin, are right now in the Kuril Islands, south of Kamchatka, north of Hokkaido, looking for killer whales. So what have we found out? As with many orca projects, we have based our work on photo ID and recordings. We have now more than 2,000 individual photo IDs of resident or fish-eating killer whales, and more than 150 of photo IDs of the mammal eaters. There aren't any offshore orcas, but otherwise these fish eaters and the mammal eaters do seem to be equivalent to the big orcas and resident orcas that you find off the eastern North Pacific. The dialect systems are comparable in their complexity and structure, of course with Russian accents, and Olga has led the writing of numerous papers based on her and the wider team's recordings. Now in 2020, we had 47 working days and 28 days with killer whales at 2 locations in Kamchatka, one our usual location in the southeast at the Vacha Gulf, and the other about 360 kilometers north opposite the Kronotsky Reserve. And we had new and very rarely seen orcas found in that northern area. And that it was great because the team met the reserve director and he introduced them to the governor of Kamchatka, and we were able to sit down and talk about some of the problems of marine mammal conservation in Kamchatka. And FARAP was asked to advise on whale watching regulations, which is developing in that area. So one big finding with the field research last year was meeting calves of 4 females in different families who hadn't had calves for more than 10 years. And analyzing the demography data, we found that the birth rates are very low, with a lot of young calves dying between 2006 and 2016. And in recent years, that has gone up a little bit, but it is concerning. We also have increasing information based on feeding habit studies, some of it coming from scales and some of it coming from drones, that the fish-eating killer whales have a large variety of prey species in their diet, not just various species of salmon, but also Atka mackerel and other fishes. And also, as in the past, we included research into Baird's beaked whales, humpback whales, and North Pacific right whales when we see them. And this is part of the beauty of this FARAP work, that we've been able to spin off studies into these other species, along with papers and with individual FARAP members taking the lead. After the field season in 2020, there was a massive die-off of invertebrates along the coast of Vivatcha Gulf, Kamchatka. And we really weren't able to find out very much about it in terms of the effect on killer whales, but we will find out more this summer. In other news, the Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin reported recently that the government will pass a new bill banning the harvesting of whales and dolphins. This comes from the whale jail, famous whale jail episode in Primorye territory, after which the government had tightened the requirements for catching orcas and belugas for entertainment and educational purposes. And if you look at, from the period of 2004 onwards, when the first orcas were captured, there were more than 20 orcas removed, and all from the mammal-eating groups in the Okhotsk. I mean, most of those were from 2016. So we're hoping that this is now ended. For more information on our project, you can follow our webpage or our Facebook page, Russian Orcas, russianorca.org, or Instagram. I gave a summary of the project, how it got started, and what we found out over the years in the 2019 edition of Orca the Whale Called Killer, along with photographs. And we've published quite a few papers, all available on ResearchGate, or let me know if you're looking for something. We're very grateful to all our sponsors, including Whale and Dolphin Conservation, Animal Welfare Institute, the Pew Foundation for Marine Conservation, Humane Society International, and Ocean Care. Thank you very much.
Hello everybody, my name is Ruth Esteban and I'm a marine mammal researcher at the Madeira Whale Museum, and I'm going to introduce you to the killer whales of the Strait of Gibraltar, an endangered subpopulation which is now famous because it's interacting with the vessels. We did a present pseudo-arson model, and the spring model predicted that the most important area for the killer whales was the western part of the Strait of Gibraltar. So if the killer whales try to follow the tuna in deep waters, tunas can escape going to deeper waters, and killer whales are not, as they are not deep divers, they cannot follow them to the deep. In the other hand, in shallow waters, the killer whales are able to follow the tunas for up to 30 minutes until the tunas get tired and they can capture them. It is in the summer season when we observe the killer whales most of the time interacting with a longline fishery in the central waters of the Strait of Gibraltar, where the killer whales capture the tuna from the long lines of the fishermen. And in this case, the fishery will make these tunas that normally cross the strait in deep waters more accessible to the killer whales, being in this case a hunting technique with a low expenditure of energies. Furthermore, in 2019, this subpopulation was categorized as critically endangered by the IUCN Red Dot list of threatened species. 2020 arrived, a year of changes, in many ways for human, but also for this subpopulation. After the almost worldwide lockdown, a disruptive behavior was observed in which these killer whales were reported interacting with boats, actively entering in contact with the vessels, particularly with sailing vessels, resulting mainly in breaking the moving parts of their rudders. In the middle of all that craziness, we created a working group formed by the NGOs, whale watching companies, and administrations as a result of previously existing collaboration, and with a willing of giving response to this unprecedented situation. First, I'm going to show you one of the first interactions that happened in the Strait of Gibraltar. As you can see, the pilot was trying to control the vessel, taking control of the wheel until he got his shoulder damaged and left the wheel loose. The animals took control of the rudder and turned the boat almost 360 degrees. The animals are normally at the center of the boat, as you can see, really close to the hull, showing off paralysis and assignment. And sometimes they do an intense babbling that you're going to see in a second there. In this case, they were lucky and nothing happened to the boat, and even the skipper recovered well soon after of the shoulder. In this case, I let the sun. You're going to know why. Yeah, because they were bumping the rudder pretty hard. This is why it is important to leave the wheel loose. These animals ended, in this case, the animals ended breaking the spades of the rudder in half, as you can see in these pictures. In this other case, you can see how the animals are kind of calm, as the boat is almost stopped. They were not going that fast. Also, they were already bumping the rudder, but they are mostly, as you can see, inspecting the stern. This was one of the worst cases. It occurred completely during night. The animals were for an hour with the boat and almost constantly bumping the boat really actively. So you can understand the stress of the crew in this case. The animals broke the rudder, bending the rudder shaft with an angle of almost 90 degrees, as you can see here in this picture. This is another sample of a reef where the animals were only touching the floater, as you will see now. Yeah, here you have it. And so far, we could identify two interacting groups. In this one, in particular, the active animals are the juveniles, while the others stay away from the boat. And these are the numbers that we were able to gather, but we do still believe that there are more cases that we don't know about. In summary, there has been 72 interactions, which in average were 20 minutes long. And this is the action plan that we designed based on the videos and the testimonies of the crews. Basically, we suggest to stop the vessel whenever it is possible. Of course, there are situations that cannot be. Contact the authorities, leave the wheel loose, and when the animals stop interacting and they have been bumping for a while, check the integrity of the rudder and ask for a tow if needed. And that's it. I would like to thank everyone that has contributed somehow in this study. This is coming from a team effort, and also I would like to thank the Orca Network for inviting us to present this to you and to all of you for assisting in this. Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure.
Wow. Well, this is our kickoff today and hopefully setting the tone for Orca Action Month. I'm Alan, along with Cindy here in Friday Harbor. The whole month is jam-packed full of events. They've really put together quite a bit here. Go to orcamonth.com to see the complete calendar and registration details. It's all there at orcamonth.com. Cindy hooked me up to a shot caller, so if I say the wrong website, anyway, you can read a lot more about the Southern residents, find out about all the activity. They're also, if you happen to miss anything, go to orcamonth.com. And then if you have a young orca lover, I know a lot of kids are orca advocates, as it were. They can check out the family corner on the website. There's a little portion there for families at orcamonth.com. A lot of things for the kids. And if you're looking for opportunities to win prizes, I know I am, you can play games during Orca Month. They've really whipped up some fun things. There's a special Orca Salmon Alliance scavenger hunt. That'll be on the website tomorrow as well. Check out Orca Month's Facebook and Instagram pages to win other great prizes. And a big thanks, I would say, to the Orca Network folks for really putting this on. Cindy, thank you. And thanks to Kathy Eberhardt for making sure all the captions are right, but she didn't put idiot under me. Oh well, maybe next year. Again, thank you everybody at Orca Network and the Orca Salmon Alliance, Colleen and Amanda, thank you for all of your preparation. And thanks for joining us. I think we were well attended today. Any final words, Cindy Hansen?
I just want to thank everybody so much for joining us today. Thank Amanda for all of your great work. Susan Anderson is on watching as well. She's been doing an amazing job with Orca Month, helping to put together the website and all of the different events that we have. Thanks, Colleen, for being here to help. Thanks, Susan and Howie, for starting Orca Month in the first place. We're just really, really glad that we were able to do this virtually and have so many people join us. So thanks, everybody, and we hope that you will get involved with Orca Month and get involved with helping these orcas recover.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, guys.
Our pods have kept us going this past year. We aren't the only ones who thrive together and rely on our pods. The Salish Sea is home to the Southern resident orcas, who eat together, play together, and enjoy each other's company. Our Southern resident orcas need our help. With dwindling salmon runs, pollution, and ship noise in their home waters, it's time for us to take action. So this Orca Month, join us for online events. Let's celebrate with our pods while protecting theirs. Join our events throughout the month of June. Visit www.orcamonth.com to find out more about Orca Month.